Right. We should be back. Chat, let me know if you can't hear us. But we should be all good. I don't have the chat up, so I can't see whether we are or not. Hang on. Right. We should... Right, okay, yeah, everything seems fine. Right. What were you saying before? Sorry, where were we?
All right, I think my last sentence was something along the lines of every time I gave John an inch of rope, he would continue to hang himself with it. We were arguing over whether or not JonTron's talking points were very similar to neo-Nazi rhetoric or any kind of like race-based
it was about
rhetoric, right?
About the white ethno-state idea that you had.
Yeah. So these were multiple statements made by JonTron. Okay, so firstly, I tried to reframe the argument because I wouldn't expect him to bring up this ethno-state thing, right? I was kind of assuming that maybe he was misstepping, so I tried to reframe that argument using a specific example. I asked him, if 100 million Mexicans came to the United States and integrated with the culture immediately, would that be okay? And he asked me again to re-clarify, and once I re-clarified, he said that, yeah, it would probably be an okay thing. So I thought at that point, then, we could move on to talking about culture, because we'd reframed his argument in a more sensible way. But immediately after that, he decided to walk to that's not normally how it happens, though, and I ask him what he means by that, only asking, not insinuating anything, and he says, usually they would come slower and integrate with the gene pool, right? That's... I'm not sure how many ways...
I agree that he's definitely proposing his ideas in a very bad way. But he is right, though, isn't he?
How many other kinds of ways can you propose? Like,
well, look, I don't think...
only one
yeah, okay, hang on. Look, he's not arguing that black people be expelled from the United States. He's not even arguing that Hispanic people...
No, but he did compare black people in the United States to black people in Africa and said these types of people cause problems all around the world.
He didn't. He just said, what about in Africa? And if you actually look at the crime rates in Africa, they're actually... I mean, in some places, they're way higher than the United States.
So, but do you think comparing black people in Africa is a valid comparison to black people in the United States?
Well, it depends what their situation is, doesn't it?
I mean, don't think so.
Of course it does.
What similarities do they have besides their skin color?
Well, it could be levels of poverty, levels of single parenthood, bad opportunities, things like this. It could be wars, gangs.
Why not say then compare impoverished people in Africa or compare people with similar levels of poverty in Africa to people with levels of poverty in the United States? Do you see how there's so many other ways that you could...
I totally agree, but honestly, I think it's because of generally the way that Americans conduct dialogue on these issues. I really, because we don't use those sorts of terms in Britain yet. I see like left-wing Americans using these terms all the time, and it makes me cringe. I hate it.
I mean, I'm cringing right now. Like, I don't know, like, what would he have to say? Here's a question. What would JonTron have to say for you to be convinced that it was about race to him? What statement would he have to
something
make?
Something like, I think black people are inferior and should be kicked out of the country. I'd say that's openly racist.
Anything short of that doesn't cut it for you. Can't possibly be racist.
Well, no, listen, I'm not saying that JonTron didn't say things that could be interpreted as racist, but I don't think that's because he is a racist. I think that's because he's very bad in debate and got really flustered.
Okay, so the fact that he said that he wants a culture of people that look like each other, that tribalism is important, that he wants a homogenous society, that he pointed back to the white...
Did he say that look like each other?
Yes, that's why he kept bringing up tribalism and everything, yeah. And he said back in the 1960s we were 90% white, and the fact that the big picture that we talked about for half the debate was whites becoming a minority in the United States. None of this maybe even gives you the inkling that he's pointing towards the fact that race is kind of an important thing for him. It doesn't...
Well, it might be an important thing for him, but that doesn't mean he's inherently a racist, does it? For example, I mean, if you're saying that race being important to you is racist, then all of Black Lives Matter is highly racist.
Okay, what word should I use instead then? Because initially I didn't say racist. Initially I said he was advocating for an ethnocentric state.
Well, I don't know what word you should use, because I don't think he's advocating for an ethnocentric state, and I don't think that merely talking about race is something that makes you a racist, or even making observations about demographic trends. I don't think that makes you a racist either.
Okay, so can I just state Let me just state your
No,
position. You tell me if
sure.
if you agree or disagree with this, okay? So I don't misunderstand you. So even though JonTron spoke about integration with the gene pool, he spoke in favor of keeping America majority white, nothing to do with culture, majority white. He spoke about the benefits of tribalism, being surrounded by people that look like yourselves, and then pointed to the fact that America used to be better when it was majority white in the 1960s. None of these things to you.
Did he say that it was better? I don't recall him saying it was better. I recall him saying that America is a European descended nation.
He said that it used to be a majority white, and if we're not careful, it's going to be a majority non-white. I believe the implication there is that it would be bad if it became majority non-white. I don't think that's a big stretch.
Well, would it not be?
Why would you be worried about it?
Well, why are you worried about minorities in America anyway?
What do you? Because minorities in America face a special set of problems that are unique to them. What do you mean?
Okay, so why would white people want to become minorities if they face a special set of problems?
I don't know if they would face the same problems.
Why wouldn't
going
they?
from majority to? Because a lot of the problems that minorities face are things that range back into history. I don't think that white people become a minority all of a sudden erase all of the prosperous history that they've had.
No, but in 100 years' time, maybe it'll be different, wouldn't it? I mean, no dominant group in a country would ever willingly. Hang on. No dominant group in a country would ever willingly become the minority group, would they?
I don't know.
I mean, that was the problem with colonialism, wasn't it?
No, those are totally different times.
You don't, no, I'm not saying they're not different times, but I'm saying that the problems are that when you have different people with different cultures and different attitudes arriving in different areas, you end up getting friction between them. And the thing is, there are so many other problems as well. I agree with you that JonTron was making a silly argument as well. I don't even agree that the way he was framing it and what he was saying, I don't even think this is something that is a good argument against what you were saying. I mean, there are far stronger arguments. But, I mean, so do we want to go into that right now? Or?
Well, are we not going to agree then that JonTron was pointing towards an ethno-state? We can't agree on that?
No, because he wasn't saying there shouldn't be black people. He wasn't saying there shouldn't be Mexicans or Chinese or anything like that. He was really, his concern was the mass immigration from Mexico and the Southern America. And if he's correct on those numbers. I mean, if you look at the chart that he showed, I don't actually have it at hand, which is annoying. I should have got it. But if you look at the chart, you'll see that the percentage of black people and other remains relatively constant, but the percentage of Hispanic just is rapid increase, and that's obviously due to mass immigration.
Okay, but every time I asked him to give a defense of why this was a bad thing, he would respond with race-related claims.
Well, okay.
He wouldn't go to culture, he wouldn't go to crime, he would retreat back to race every single time.
Yeah, well, I mean, human beings are inherently tribalistic, aren't they? I mean, that's not...
I mean, I don't know. Human beings are inherently a lot of things, but I don't know.
Yeah, I know, but what I mean is
they've
inherently got in-group preference. So I can see why people would advocate for in-group preference, and I wouldn't begrudge anyone from anywhere to do that on any standard. I mean...
Okay, but that's kind of hard to do in the United States when we have a multitude of groups here, and we've already included some people that aren't necessarily even included in other parts of the world.
Sure.
For instance, if there was a Slavic person in the United States, nobody would see them as a Slav, like they would in a lot of parts of Europe, right? Western Europe especially. But in the United States, they're just a white person, right?
I mean,
what?
Well, in Europe, we don't really distinguish a whole lot about the Slavs.
Really? I hear really, really different things.
Yeah, but who do you hear that from?
I'll give you if you think so, but...
Who do you hear... Yeah, but I'm just saying that as someone who lives in Western Europe.
Sure, okay.
I mean,
if you want to say that, that's fine, but that goes contrary to every... I've never heard that in my entire life. That nobody in Europe makes fun of Slavic people, or...
Oh, no. We make fun of everyone. I mean, it's never based on Slavic people. It's always based on nationality in Europe. But we make fun of everyone. You know, everyone has... fun made of them based on their national characteristics. That's just something that happens in Europe. This is exactly what I mean about the race thing, right? You instantly racialize something that isn't actually racialized here; it's nationalized here. You know, people do it on national culture.
That's the difference. I'm sorry, but what you just said is, it's very different in America. This is why we have very different cultures. When you say race, and then you say, well, it's not about race; it's about nation. In America, all we have is our nation, right? So like in Europe, you can talk about, French people are from France, right? Italian people are from Italy, German people are German, Polish people are Polish. In America, we don't have this culture like American is, white person from Germany. Like, that doesn't really fit
Yeah, of course.
in terms of how we define unless you're literally talking about like Native Americans, right? Like,
No, it wasn't. This is probably one of the reasons that you racialize things, right? So, and it's probably one of the reasons you don't do it via state.
sure,
to,
but
to maintain the sort
again,
of cohesion of the United States.
to reiterate, I tried really, really hard multiple times to get away from the race thing because I didn't want to take up that argument. Multiple times I tried to back away from the race thing, and JonTron kept diving back in head first with the gene pool, with the tribalism, with the everyone looking alike, with the with the homogenous society.
Okay, well, I have to say, I watched the stream obviously, and it seemed that you were happy to entertain the arguments. So
no, I didn't want to. That's why I
Okay.
gave the Mexican example to move away from it. I specifically said if people integrated with the culture immediately, would it be okay? And he was like, yeah, that would be fine. I was like, okay, well then let's talk about culture. That's what I wanted to, because personally, I don't like arguing against the race realists, because when you start arguing against people that are actually racist, those are very difficult arguments to have for or against racism, because you have to get very, very deep into philosophy at that point. It's a much different discussion. So I would prefer to talk about things like culture. But JonTron was the one that kept diving back into the race thing. Right, that's why we talked about whites becoming the minority, and you even seemed to kind of want to take up that argument earlier.
Well,
where
we
they
can
wouldn't wanna
absolutely
become
take
the
up that
minority, right?
argument. We absolutely can take up that argument if you want. And I mean, you've already said that being a minority isn't usually advantageous. So why
But
would
not
anyone want to
because
become
you're
one?
But being a minority isn't disadvantageous because you are the minority. That's not how that works, right? Typically, there is a whole lot of history leading up to that.
I actually
For example,
disagree. I actually completely disagree with you. I think it's disadvantageous because you are the minority.
okay, then why do women face disadvantages in the society when they're not minorities?
I don't agree that women face disadvantages.
Okay, how about 100 years ago? Why did women face disadvantages in society even though they weren't minorities?
Because we had a much more regressive society back then.
Okay,
But
so then
here
being a
and
minority,
now, I don't agree that they do.
okay, then why is there such a massive misrepresentation in earnings or in representation of women in certain fields or jobs?
Individual choice.
Okay. We've touched on this argument before. I don't think we're ever going to agree.
I mean, I don't think we're going to agree either. I mean, all I see in society are various systems designed to benefit women, and for some reason, and I'm not even bothered about the reason. Women can choose their own destinies as and when they.
Why have they been
as they will.
choosing? Why have they been choosing more and more to get into different sciences over the past 20 or 30 years? Have women just evolved biologically like that, or what?
I have no idea. Why do they?
I don't know. It seems to be heavily influenced by the culture.
There's undoubtedly a cultural aspect, but I mean, did you not see
so
the?
there is
Hang on. Did you not see the documentary on the Norwegian gender paradox?
No, I didn't.
Oh, it's really, really worth checking out. But basically, Norway is the the typical Scandinavian model of gender equality, and yet women still overwhelmingly refuse to do things like construction work and whatnot, and men overwhelmingly refuse to be midwives and nurses and things like this. Even though they've got every incentive in the world, they're as gender neutral as you're going to get. Even then, men and women just happen to choose different professions. So maybe it is evolutionary.
Sure, I don't deny that they're in a perfectly balanced world. I think that you would still see some disproportionate amount of gender selection for certain disciplines, but it is undeniable that in the United States, over the past few decades, women have overwhelmingly been have higher representation across multiple disciplines in school and multiple types of jobs than compared to in the past. So it would seem like
Sorry, hang on. Before you, sorry, I don't think I understood that correctly. Can you repeat your argument for me, please?
So women have a much higher representation across a multitude of fields than they did 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah. But that's because you
Right.
have things like quotas, affirmative action, and mass campaigns to try and encourage them into these fields.
Okay, so you think that the only reason why women are choosing to be more involved in sciences and engineerings is because they're being forced into it? It's
No,
not
I don't
because
think
they're
anyone's
making-
being forced to do anything. I think they're being
Okay, so then-
encouraged.
Okay, so some encouragement is starting to balance out, the representation of the genders in certain fields.
No, I
So that
disagree. I
seems-
disagree with the framing. I don't think it's about balance.
Okay, can you frame it for me then? It
Yeah,
sounded like you were saying that they were
it's
encouraged,
encouraging
so more of
people
them
who
are-
might otherwise not have been interested in going into these fields to be interested in going into these fields by appealing to them like any advertiser advertises anything else. And that's you're effectively, if you were to like talk about this from a corporate perspective, this would be the sales you would be seeing, women going into these fields. This is an increase in sales because you've targeted specific demographics. That's what happens.
Okay, so do you think that there haven't been these same encouragements for men for all of human history? You don't think that men are massively encouraged to take up these certain disciplines?
Some disciplines, yeah. I mean, men are,
Okay, so then,
traditionally, anyway. I don't know about now, but, like, traditionally, there have been certainly been occupations where men have absolutely been encouraged. Often by, like, millennia-long traditions, such as to be a soldier.
okay, I'm not talking about the ubiquitously bad traditions, like being a coal miner or being a soldier. Okay, I'm talking about
I
things that
wasn't
people
talking about those
wanted
either,
to.
actually.
Okay, all right. You brought up soldiers, so I wasn't sure if you were headed.
Well,
on
that was just one. That was the most. That's the most obvious example, because I mean, like, every culture has heroic traditions, which is deliberately designed to incentivize young men to want to fight and to defend what is theirs, because in the past they had to do that. I mean, they still have to do that now, to be fair. It's just we're a lot more civilized about the thing. But there are occupations that not designed, but that are just culturally more male focused, and there are occupations that are culturally more female focused.
Okay, so let me go back and connect the dots from your statements. Tell me if you disagree with any of the things I've said, okay? So women are being represented more across many different fields today compared to what they were 20...
No. The word representative is entirely misleading, right? These women don't...
There's a higher hang on.
I think it's worth hammering this out, though, because these women are not representatives of other people. These women only represent themselves and their own individual life goals and career choices.
Okay, so there is a higher percentage of women, okay, across many fields today than there were 20 or 30 years ago, okay?
Some, yeah.
Okay. You have said as much that there is more encouragement and advertising for women to take up these fields than there were 20 or 30 years ago, yes?
Yes.
Okay, if you believe in both these points to be true, how can you say that culture has no influence over what people choose to do?
I never said culture has no influence.
Okay, if you believe that culture can heavily influence your career
I didn't say
choices,
heavily influence either. This is
Okay,
the thing,
why-
right? No, this is the thing, right? Culture undoubtedly has some influence, but I think that there are also biological imperatives that men and women both follow that also have an influence. Now, I did A-level psychology about 20-odd years ago now, and back then, they weren't sure what the level of the nature-nurture debate was. Back then, they thought maybe about 55% culture, 45% nature, or what, I can't remember if that's the exact number. But it was around 50-50. They really weren't sure, and I don't think they are sure yet. I mean, I haven't looked this up or anything, but back then it just wasn't known. But it was known that some amount was natural and some amount was cultural.
Sure.
That's my opinion on it.
Okay, but you're trying to make it sound like it's majority natural versus
No,
majority
I think it's
nurture.
I don't know. I mean, I think there are certainly.
But you're not saying you don't know. You're saying that it's a biological imperative. That's what you've been saying. You don't.
There are biological, like, I didn't have a better word to hand, like, biological reasons for people choosing to do certain things. Like, for example, I imagine that many women don't go into construction because they look at it and think, wow, that looks like hard physical labor. And, you know, if you're like a 5'2", 120-pound woman, maybe hard physical labor doesn't appeal to you. And that's biological. Agreed?
Agreed. But again, now you're reaching into like the very obvious physical differences, right?
Yeah,
I'm not
that was
gonna
just
tell you that
that was
the
just an
genders are
obvious
equal
one, yeah.
physiologically, but I don't know how that comparison is apt to describe why somebody would go into an engineering field or not, right? Where you don't have to be a strong, masculine, burly man, you know, to be an electrical engineer or a nuclear engineer or something like that.
Well, I think that it might have something to do with the original evolutionary pressures on the human species. I mean, I'm no evolutionary biologist, so I'll just be giving you a layman's interpretation here. But do you not think that might be in some way connected to man's requirement to build?
I'm not sure. That's a hard one to answer.
Well, we've just agreed that hard physical labor is obviously most suited for the people strong enough to do hard physical labor.
Yeah, because we're talking about physiological differences in muscle and bone structure, not in the brain.
I know, but why wouldn't there be some kind of evolutionary adaptation to make them simply prefer doing that sort of thing? If they happen to be the ones suited to do it, why wouldn't there be an evolutionary adaptation in their brain to make them enjoy doing the thing that they're suited to?
It's possible that that's true. And
Well, I
if we
think it
were
might be,
30
yeah.
years later, if we were 30 years later into encouraging women to become more interested in other disciplines, and that number hadn't moved at all, I would be 100%.
Yeah, I know, but that's
agreeing.
why I brought up the Norwegian gender paradox, because I mean, I can't remember
Okay,
how
I
many
can't
years.
speak
It's not
to the
30
Norway-
years. Yeah, I know, but I
can't-
can. That's the thing. I'm telling you something you don't know. That's my point, right? So
Okay,
what I'm saying is,
then I'm telling you something that you don't know.
Okay, go
The
on.
representation of women in I'm sorry, I can't say representation. The distribution of women, or the amount of women that are in these fields, okay, is much higher. Sometimes doubling or tripling from 10% or 5% up to 30 or 45% than it used to be a long time ago, right? You have
Yeah.
massively higher numbers of women.
Well, do you want to
interested in these
give me an
fields.
example of a field? Let's stick with an example,
Sure thing. Hold on, I can actually find you.
just so we're being a little bit more specific. Take time.
All right, I'm sending you a link on Skype. So
Okay.
these are representations of women across medical school, law school, and physical sciences. This article in specific references the falling of women's interest into computer science, and then speaks about some cultural phenomenon that could possibly explain that.
Yeah. I mean,
So
it's entirely possible that there are cultural phenomenon, that there were cultures involved that prohibited women from wanting to join these fields. Because I mean, like, at no point have these fields been 0%. So we can safely say that, according to the graph you sent through, anyway. So according to the graph you sent through, there's been no point where women have been physically excluded by simply a ban on women, right?
But that's not how society works today. You don't
No,
need
no,
a
I'm not.
physical.
I'm not suggesting it is, but what I'm saying is that I mean there are going to be certain like cultures that certain people are not attracted to. You just happen to be picking women going into like law school and medical school, physical sciences, things like this. But I mean there are certain cultures that I would be naturally excluded from on the basis that I don't like that culture either.
Okay, but it's hard to say how much is your natural choice versus how much is the society around you influencing it.
Yeah,
Do you
it is,
agree
yeah.
with that?
Yeah, it is.
Okay,
That's why we're
so-
stuck on this problem, because we just don't know.
But we can point to research over time. If you look at this graph in the 70s, and we can go and find a multitude of others, if the interest in these fields of women was 5 to 15%, and that interest has gone up to be almost at parity with men, it seems like culture had a heavy hand in deciding who was interested in what.
Sure, in these three fields, and it's got to around 50%. So that's fine. You know, this isn't these aren't things that have to be gendered. And once you not remove, but like lift the cultural stigma around these, it turns out the women are just as interested, and that's fine.
That's my argument. Yeah, I agree with that. Of course.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is it's not entirely cultural. And
It
this
might
is
not
this is
be
why you never
entirely
want to talk about the
but-
dirty jobs, because you know, regardless of lifting any cultural stigma from them, like in Norway, it always seems to end up being majority men in things like construction and stuff
I don't
like
want to
this.
talk about the dirty jobs because I don't want anybody working the dirty jobs. I don't want
No,
more
I
men
know,
going into
it's
the coal
okay.
mines, or more men going into the, or women going into the draft, or men going into the draft, or people
Yeah,
having
yeah,
to work
sure.
construction
Sure.
jobs.
I'm not really worried about what you want. That's the thing. I'm not saying about what I want either. I'm just trying to establish what is. And there's certainly a strong cultural element, but there is also, I think, a strong natural element. Do you
There
not?
might be a natural element. I agree with that, but that natural
Well, there
element is
certainly
not
is.
driving a 90 to 10 disparity in these fields.
Not in these fields, no, but it is certainly driving a greater disparity in other fields.
Sure, it might be, and there might be some fields, especially related to physical labor, where there will always be a great disparity.
Not
I'm
just physical
denying
labor.
that.
I mean, if you look at like architecture and stuff like that, it's you know, in many, and it's just more about what people are naturally inclined to do, and I think people should be, you know, enabled to follow their natural proclivities. I mean, one thing I find really unusual is that people in a liberal society think that we would see inequality of anything. That's the antithesis of what a liberal society should
Okay,
produce.
but you're strawmanning the opposing side. Nobody is talking about reaching 100% parity.
There are lots of people saying that. There are lots of
Okay,
people.
I
mean,
don't usually entertain myself with the arguments
okay,
of the
I'm not saying
extremists
you're
on the
doing
left,
that.
okay?
I'm not. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, I'm not saying you're
So-
doing that. But there are
Okay,
people
so
who do
I,
that.
along with a lot of other reasonable people, are not looking to reach 100% parity. But when you're talking about a 90-10 split or an 80-20 split, there's probably something in a scientific field or in an engineering field, not something directly related to your physical capabilities. There's probably something more going on here rather than just, well, women are choosing different fields.
Well, yeah, they're choosing to avoid certain fields for certain reasons, but what's
And
the
you're
problem?
saying those
What's the problem with, say, like midwives being 90% female? What's wrong with that?
there is nothing inherently wrong with the job. We just want to make sure as a society that we're not trying to hardcore push people off into fitting particular gendered jobs. That shouldn't be our goal as a society, because
Okay,
we
but
discourage
who's doing that exactly?
everybody in society. What do you mean? Movies, film, entertainment, radio, songs, like it's at every level of society.
What,
There's
is
not
is
like
that because they generally represent the stereotypical view of that field?
It could be. I mean, it's a cyclical thing. Society shows, or entertainment and media show us what society is, and then society becomes a reflection of entertainment and media. Like, that can be a two-way street, of course.
I don't know. I think, does art imitate life, or does life imitate art?
It goes both ways.
Maybe to a certain degree, but I think the life comes first, and then the art comes
To
second.
a massive
doesn't it?
degree. I was talking with somebody about this yesterday. Are you familiar with the show The X-Files?
Yeah.
Okay,
Love
that's
The
a show that
X-Files.
could have very easily showed two male FBI agents, right? Could have
Yeah.
very easily been two FBI, and it would have worked fine. There's nothing
No,
that
it
would have
wouldn't.
been
There'd have been
taken
no
from the show.
romantic subplot between Mulder and Scully. That's one of the things everyone hung on for like 9 seasons until she got stung by a
sure,
bee.
but I'm just saying that it could have been two males, right? And it wouldn't have mattered. But there was a
It
female.
would have
there.
mattered, though. That's the thing. It would have mattered because you wouldn't have been able to have the male-female dynamic that they did have.
So you're telling me that the X-Files wouldn't have been able to exist if that romantic subplot didn't exist? You're telling me
It
that
wouldn't
that
have been
was
able
the
to
major
exist if
selling point of the
Scully
show?
wasn't Scully. She'd have to be a different character.
So, okay, but what I'm saying is the show The X-Files could have existed without there being a female character. It could have been two
Well, yeah,
males,
it
right?
wouldn't have been the same show, though.
Okay, but it could have still existed. It could have been in a similar vein. Two people investigating paranormal activity, right?
Sure. And isn't there,
Okay.
like, Supernatural or something? Isn't that...
I don't know.
I don't
All
watch
I'm
it,
saying
but,
is
yeah.
that the fact that Scully was in that show served as a major instigating effect of a lot of women going into different scientific, FBI, and otherwise related fields. It's called the Scully effect. There were a ton of women, and it was actually like a traceable thing in society, who were encouraged to take up interest across these different fields because they saw a woman on the screen who was, doing these things.
Okay. I'm sure that there were.
Okay, so this is an example of where if the X-Files would have been about two men, and I would make the argument here, well, what if the X-Files had a woman in it? Somebody in your position would make the argument, well, why do you have to force women in it? Don't you think people just want to see men on screen? Right? That would be kind of like, I feel like that would be a similar argument thing. Like, well, you don't have to force something on screen that's not natural. You don't have to force somebody to change the way.
Yeah, but I'm not
showing.
arguing against the plurality of media. I absolutely think there should be.
Okay, but earlier you were saying that all media is just a reflection of society, right? Well, Scully,
Well,
as an
I think it
FBI
is.
agent and a scientist, was kind of an odd one out. That wasn't very common, that women were that interested in those topics, at least 20 years ago as compared to now.
Yeah, I'm sure it wasn't that common, but there's been nothing stopping women from becoming FBI agents.
But there has been. It's a cultural thing.
Yeah, but that doesn't. No, that's not. That doesn't stop people because there are always a percentage of FBI agents that are women. It's a disincentive, I will grant you, but it doesn't stop anyone from doing anything.
Okay, it is a disincentive then. If you massively disincentivize certain groups of people, you are less likely to see them choose certain paths in life. Can we agree on that or no?
We absolutely can agree on that.
Okay, then we have no argument. So the goal would be
actually, the question is, what can we do in the service of this? Because I don't think coming along to someone else's culture and saying, okay, you have to change this culture so we can incentivize people who aren't part of this culture, I disagree with that.
I'm sorry, are you saying that women aren't part of our culture?
No.
Okay, then where did that argument come from? What did that mean, getting people from another culture to come and tell us?
No, and not another culture. I'm talking about like subcultures. You get subcultures
Okay, are women
everywhere.
a subculture in the United
No,
States?
of course not.
Okay, I don't understand where this argument is coming from or going at all then.
Okay. For example, I'll use myself as an example, right? I'm not a nurse, and I didn't have any interest in becoming a nurse for a multitude of reasons, and one of the reasons was because of the way nursing is run. Now, there's nothing wrong with it. It works very well for the people involved, and I'm sure they're very happy with it, but it's not the something I want to do. I mean, it's the same with, the reason I didn't become a Wall Street broker is because I don't like the way that the Wall Street culture is. And I am outside of that culture, and I look at that culture and think, that doesn't appeal to me at all. I don't like the hyper-competitive nature of it. I don't like the sleaziness, the sliminess that seems to ooze out of it. Not for me. I wouldn't suggest that some other third party comes into the Wall Street culture and says, right, you're not doing this in the way that Carl doesn't like, therefore you have to change so he feels incentivized to join you.
I don't think we're ever going to agree on this. You seem to think that every single agent in a society, even though you've admitted earlier that people can be disincentivized or incentivized to certain behaviors, you're giving me that every single person in society is this beacon of individual agency that is free from cultural influence.
No, not at all. No, this is me expressing how cultural influence influences me. No, I'm literally telling you, the culture of Wall Street repels me. That's a cultural influence on me. That means
no, that's not a cultural influence on you. That is you objectively evaluating that you wouldn't want to be a part of Wall Street. That's not a cultural influence on you.
But I'm looking at their culture and thinking, well, that doesn't appeal to me. Therefore, I'm not going to join.
But you are making the decision as an objective beacon of individual agency.
Yeah,
right?
Are you saying that women aren't objective beacons of individual agency?
You're not analyzing culture's impact on you. You're saying that you, as a rational, logical, individual agent, can decide that you don't want to be a part of something. That isn't saying that maybe the reason why you're deciding that is because you weren't raised in a very ultra-competitive culture, or maybe you didn't have ultra-competitive pushes, and you're like, these are analyses of culture on an individual, not, I have decided I don't want to be part of that, so I'm free of the influence of culture, right? Earlier, you admitted that it is possible to disincentivize people from something, right?
Of course, that disincentivizes me.
Okay, so therefore, on the flip side, it is also possible to incentivize people towards things.
Yes, I know.
Right?
Hang on. Yeah, okay. I agree with you what you're saying, but I don't think you understand what I'm trying to say. You don't have the authority to determine who should be incentivized in any way, shape, or form. It's not your responsibility. But listen. It's not your responsibility. It's not the government's responsibility. It is literally nobody's responsibility to try and incentivize other rational human beings to do things that they otherwise would choose not to do.
Okay, but the thing is, the things that you choose to do are heavily tied into what the society that you lived in. It's almost completely determined. So whether or not there is a government or somebody else...
Right, okay, look, it's not deterministic. It's influential.
Sure, it's heavily influential, massively influential. Nobody today chooses to pick up a spear and go hunt in the plains for food and to live on, personally grown crops and Society has a very heavy influence on what we choose to do as people, right? Regardless of whether there is some agency telling people how to influence people, it happens, right? When you go and you play games where every lead character is a male protagonist, or you watch a movie where every single lead character is a male protagonist, or you listen to media or, like the radio or songs where every single singer is a male singer, male protagonist, and like every form of media, right? This has an influence on people over time, right?
Sure.
So I don't think there's anything wrong.
Nobody's arguing for anything other than a plurality of these things. I'm more than happy for women to be played on the radio.
Okay,
I'm more than happy for them to have leads in films. I've got no objections to any of these things.
Okay, great. Then we don't disagree on anything. Then having better representation of women or people of color in these different fields can be have a positive impact on society, right?
No, listen, right? Again, you say representation, but you mean like just a raw number. And
yeah, that's what representation means. I don't know what you're...
No. This is the thing. They don't represent anyone. That's
I'm not saying
point.
They represent... When you talk about a representation of somebody...
I know, but this is a sort of sly term that social sciences have slipped into the dialogue that people really need to start removing from our dialogue, because this is not an appropriate word to use, because it makes them sound like politicians, and they're not. They are not representative of anyone but themselves. And each individual person has a different reason why they chose the career they did. And I'm fine with making it so that people don't have some sort of thick cultural atmosphere around a certain profession that might otherwise disincentivize them, to create some sort of corporatized office world. I'm actually okay with this. I don't like it, but I understand why people do it, and I don't have a particular problem with it. And I think, like myself, you should always opt out if that's what you want. But
sure, but right now there exists a very heavy culture that heavily incentivizes men towards certain roles, and the goal is just to make it so that both sides are incentivized just as much, not to disincentivize people towards things.
Yeah, but I've already said you're not allowed to incentivize people. You can remove disincentivizing factors,
but you already incentivize people.
You're not in control of what incentivizes people. You don't know.
It doesn't matter if you're in control of it or not. It happens.
Yeah, but it happens naturally. It happens homogeneously. Like
slavery happened naturally.
No,
that's not a good argument in favor of it.
No, it didn't. Slavery didn't happen naturally. It was a social construct.
Okay, and you don't think that do you think that being an architectural engineer is a natural thing that people choose in the wilderness?
I
These are
never
all
said it
social
was.
constructs.
I never said they weren't.
You're implying that slavery was a social construct, but none of the career choices that we make aren't social constructs? What was the point of saying that?
Why did you bring up slavery? What's it got to do with any of this?
Because you're making it sound like because you keep trying to be favorable and saying that, yeah, society can influence us, but then you keep jumping back into this, well, everything is natural, everybody chooses things naturally, everybody
there are
chooses
lots
things
of things that influence us. There are lots and lots of things. You can't just say, okay, well, it's these two things. I mean, there are lots of other things that influence us. You know, negative and positive events in our lives influence us. You know, but this is the point. This is the point. It's not all encompassing. It's not all deterministic like that. People may choose to do many different things for many different reasons, and I agree that the barriers preventing them should be removed, but that doesn't mean we then need to start pushing people. Just because there are no barriers there now, that doesn't mean we need to shove people in any direction, even if it's using really soft power, like cultural pressure, because that is just the same as keeping people out, just from the other direction.
Okay, what barriers existed to women going into law school, medical school, or physical scientists from the 70s to today?
Let's say boys' culture. You know, the sort of old boys.
Wait,
sort of
so
club.
Culture did influence it then? Which
yeah,
is
of course
it?
It did. Of course.
Okay,
look,
then we don't disagree.
Listen,
then
it's not one or the
influence on
other.
what people
No, Steve, it's not one or the other. It's both at the same time.
Okay, but women's representation in these fields went from 10% to 45%,
Sure.
not by genetically re-engineering women,
I agree.
but by changing the culture.
Yes.
Then what do we disagree with?
We disagree with the methods, right? I agree.
We didn't remove any barriers from women getting in. We just encouraged it more in culture.
Yes, I know, but part of encouraging it more is disencouraging having an exclusionary attitude within these sciences. For example, there was what was the name of the chap who he was in a conference, a scientist who was in a conference in South Korea, and it was a women's conference, and he made a joke about him being an old sexist dinosaur who doesn't want women in the lab and things like this, right? This was a joke that was taken out of context, and he eventually lost his job over this, and lost his position over this, and it was totally unfair. But the point is, in the past, I agree that there were cultures in these organizations and in these professions that would have actively disincentivized women from joining, in the same way that, like, the culture of Wall Street actively disincentivizes me from joining, right? And when it's listen, when it's on like a sort of gender basis, like boys clubs and stuff like this, and it's the same, honestly, right? It's the same thing with midwives, right? They have a very, I don't know, girls' culture. How would you describe it? Women's culture? I don't know, but it's the same thing. Now, I'm happy for these to become sort of gender neutral office spaces with like a plurality not based on things like gender, and I'm happy for those cultures. Like corporate culture is another great example. It used to be very much like hard drinking boys club sort of attitude, and that softened a lot, and I agree, because that culture actively keeps out half of the population. But now we don't then have to say to anyone, you must do something. You should be in there, because that increases representation. We don't need to do that. Now what we need to do is leave people alone and let them choose the careers they want.
Okay, so if you have no barriers to entry for women to go into a certain field, like being a doctor, there's nothing keeping them from doing it, okay? There's no barrier, there's no boys club or somebody keeping them out, right? And then you look to TV and film, and every single doctor you see is a male. Every single doctor there is a male, and men currently are massively overrepresented in the medical field. All right?
They're not overrepresented.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are over what? Can you give me a term to use instead of this?
Yeah, I know that. Well, I know we need a better one. They just make up the majority.
That is the term that everybody uses. That
is
is accepted when talking about stats. But what term would you want me to use?
Just say that men are the majority of doctors.
Okay, if men are massively the majority of doctors, and you see men in TV and film always being doctors, and every time there is a large doctor, every time there's a house MD, or there's a whatever TV show, always are male doctors, do you think that women are going to be inclined to choose fields that are constantly shown as being men fields in all of the media that surrounds them?
No, but I don't think women are ever excluded from being a doctor on TV.
And I'm not talking about excluded, okay? And yes, for a long time, most
but that's not where we live now. We don't live in that time.
Maybe not exactly now.
No, we don't at all. I mean, there are female doctors on TV. I mean, we're talking about Scully, and that's from my childhood. You know, that's
okay,
old.
So then you agree with me that having people like Scully on TV can help incentivize women towards moving towards those fields?
It can, sure. I'm not saying it couldn't.
Then what do we disagree on?
We disagree on the fact that we need to pressure people to do anything.
When it's not about pressuring people to do anything, it's just showing people in those fields or in those roles. It's not about pressuring people. Nobody is saying that.
We do that. We have a plurality of all of these things.
Okay, but we've been doing it harder over the past 20 years than we were in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Well,
right?
Yeah, but then I don't really want to live in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I don't agree with the way they did
so then the amount of the number of women in these fields has gone up as culturally we have shown women that they can be a part of these fields, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't so I'm sorry, one more time. What is it that we disagree on?
Right, okay, we disagree on the fact that we need to push people into it, which is certainly what the left is doing these days. I'm not saying you specifically, but I mean, you must...
What do you mean by push people in?
Well, okay, like things like quotas, things like affirmative action, things like campaigns. We see these all the time, like active... I mean, like literally the UK government had a This Girl Can campaign. And I was looking at this thinking, wow, if I was a woman, I would find this the saddest thing in the world.
You literally just said that seeing women in these positions in culture can influence more women to take it up. And
this
now
wasn't in culture.
This woman...
No, this wasn't in culture. This was an organised government attempt using taxpayer money to get women to play football. And
which is part of the culture.
No, it's not. Right, well, okay, playing football is, but an organised government... No, listen, a government campaign is not part of the culture. It's actually...
Of course it is.
No, of course it's not. If it was part of the culture, they wouldn't need to do it, because the government would be like, oh, we're getting everything we want. The reason they have to do these advertising campaigns is to go against culture.
Okay, so to go against culture is to be counter-culture, which is to be part of culture.
Yeah, but I don't think the government has any business trying to influence people in that manner.
Okay, in the United States, very few people smoke today because as part of our culture, smoking is just kind of gross. This has, in a large part, been instigated by the government, banning different types of political advertisements, making certain... So government can definitely have an influence on culture.
I know it can. I know it can, but I don't think it should.
Okay, those are two different arguments then. If you don't think that it should, sure, that's a valid argument.
Yeah, and then that is my argument. Yeah, I'm not saying it can't do anything of these things. But I'm saying that it shouldn't, because as soon as you open the door to, well, why doesn't the government just manipulate the culture of its country? Where does that end? What is the argument for not doing it? You know?
Believe it or not, because I'm big into capitalism and I like the free market and I don't like a lot of government intervention. I agree with that. However, if another private company decided to start a campaign to encourage women to be more interested in being doctors,
of course they can waste their money on whatever they like. You know, if you want to advertise to get women into being doctors, you can spend that money. If you want to advertise to get neckbeards into Wall Street, you can spend that money, and it'll probably have some sort of measurable effect.
Okay, then we don't disagree on anything.
No, not at all. But the thing we disagree on is the fact that you seem to think it's all culture, and it's clearly not. And honestly, you should really check out this documentary, the Gender Paradox. Because
the one called Brainwashed?
No, I think it's just called the Gender Paradox.
I'm good at looking at like the stats over a large period of time that have shown that women have gone from being 5% in certain fields to reaching almost parity, right? I think that culture is a very heavily determinant factor. I'm not going to take the insane left-wing position that everything will reach parity at some point in time. I do think that there are biological differences in men and women, and I'm even slightly inclined to believe what you said, that men might be more drawn to different types of fields of engineering, things related to building, things that might, manifest themselves in physiological ways in the man's brain. But I don't think those differences would be shown in society to be a 90-10 or a 70-30 or an 80-20 split. That's all I'm saying. That when you show, this is an anecdote. It's a shitty anecdote, and I know it's not valid, but like I was getting out of the car once with my son, and he wanted to play Zombie Killer. Are you familiar with the game Dying Light?
Oh yeah, I love it.
He wanted to play Zombie Killer or whatever. He wanted to run around and pretend that we were killing zombies. And when we got out of the car, he looked at my girlfriend and he said, hey, if you want, you can play with us too. And I thought it was a very strange statement for him to make. I was like, what do you mean she can play with us too? And he said, well, in Dying Light, when you go in the beginning, there's that girl zombie hunter. So Aaron can play with us too, right? That's like one example out of like millions of different things that advertising can have an impact on somebody, right?
Sure.
If you're constantly seeing, I mean, the computer science thing, the fact that we see such poor representation of computer science is because it's one of the only fields that was heavily advertised to men growing up. Video games were targeted towards men. Most electronics were targeted towards men. Anytime, and these old, I don't know if you're familiar with old movies like Revenge of the Nerds,
I think
any of these, right? All of these are massively male-dominated.
Okay, hang on. The thing is, the people advertising didn't have a desire to have it be men rather than women.
You're focusing on intent rather than on the effect. Right?
Yeah, but you're speaking. But what you're saying, there's a direct implication that, I mean, they advertised it to men rather than women. Okay, why would they do that?
I don't know. There's a multitude of reasons, but I'm not.
I do know. So, I mean, if you don't know, that's fine. But I'll tell you why. And the answer is very simple. It's the same reason that Lego decided to stop their gender-neutral advertising, and they also started advertising towards men. The answer is that men were more receptive to what they had.
Okay, that's very strange, because up until mass marketing occurred for electronic products, it seemed like women were increasing in representation among computer science fields along with every other discipline. But then that abruptly sharped off as soon as those things started to become available in the household.
Yeah, but that's because these things changed, didn't they?
Well, but they didn't in medical school, law school, or physical sciences. It only did in computer science when people started to advertise these only to men.
Yeah, but the medical, law, and physical sciences haven't really dropped significantly.
What do you mean haven't dropped significantly?
Well, I'm looking at your chart. If you look at the medical school, law school, and physical sciences, women are... It's been a fairly constant growth upwards. Whereas in computer science, it got to around 1980, 1985, where home consoles began coming out. I mean, if you were to chart this along the sales of consoles, you would probably see a sort of like... a crossover on the graph, you know, as women's interest goes down.
Yeah, that's the whole argument that the article is making.
Of course,
that as soon as people started to heavily market towards men, rather than keeping their marketing gender neutral, when they started to heavily market towards men, you saw women interest in the field drop off, which kind of shows that culture
men and women have different interests. That's what it shows.
No,
yes, it does. No, that's what it shows.
Opposite of
no, it doesn't. It doesn't. I promise you, it doesn't.
The article is literally about that.
Look, right. This is what the Norwegian gender paradox is about, right?
The article is literally a woman with a PhD in computer science saying that when women showed up in college classrooms taking these computer science classes, they found that they were massively behind men because all of these toys that had been marketed towards men had given them a huge head start in these classes compared to all women, and women interest started to drop off as men were exclusively advertised to for these products. And even growing up, we saw commercials that were only advertised to men for things like video games.
But the reason, look, the reason these corporations didn't start off advertising exclusively to men. The reason
for the computer stuff they did.
Okay, take the Lego example then. That is the single best example of this, right? In the 70s, the Lego's advertising was totally gender neutral. And then, as soon as they started realizing they get the numbers back and, oh, more boys are buying this than girls, they start marketing to boys. And the more they market to boys, the more sales they get from boys. And as soon as they try and literally this happened like only about 10-15 years ago, where they were like, right, okay, our market share from boys is fantastic, we huge sales, but we're not selling to girls. What are we doing wrong? They had to gender it. They had to stop making the Lego playsets about building things and make it more about like interpersonal interactions and sort of like almost like a little soap opera is included with the Lego set. And then young girls got into it. This has got to be a biological thing, right?
I mean, I don't know. Every piece of evidence that I shows me completely differently, but I haven't watched the Brainwash documentary yet, so maybe I'll come to a different conclusion.
Well, maybe honestly, it's a real thing. They just can't explain why women would choose different professions that men otherwise choose. And it's not all of them, obviously. I mean, things like, you know, medical school, law school, and science. Why would that be either way? You know, I don't see why that would be gendered in either direction. That's just for whoever's interested and is smart enough to go into these fields, surely. But when it comes to things like toys and Legos and stuff like this, there are very clear gender divides. And it's really, the thing is, people always treat this like it's sinister. It's just personal interest.
Nobody is treating it like it's sinister.
No, not you, but there are lots of people treating it like it's
there
some
might
sort of patriarchal
be, but I'm
conspiracy.
not talking about the intent. I'm talking about the cause and effect. All right, I don't
Sure.
care about the intent. The intent is irrelevant. Even in law, the intent is irrelevant. You're looking at the effect.
Okay,
right?
so let's sum it up then. I mean, I think that I mean, like going back to my A-level psychology days, I would say it's probably about 50-50 culture and nature. And you think it's more than
why,
that? Or?
If it's 50-50 culture nature, why did women's representation go from 5 or 10% to 40 to 50%?
In what? Sorry.
In medical school, law school, and interest in physical sciences.
Well, I don't see why there would be a natural divide on science. I just said I don't.
Well, but there was, and you said it's 50-50.
No.
Listen. Divide?
No. Well, it's not, is it? I mean, 50% of people going to medical school are now women. Then that shows that there's not any particular natural divide there. Proportion of men and women is about half and half.
But if it used to be 10%,
then there was probably a cultural factor. Yeah. I agree that there are certainly cultural factors that can influence, but it's not only cultural factors.
All right, I think that okay, I think we
should we change subject, because I think we've made our points clear, and I'm sure that people listening can. I mean, but honestly, I really do think it's both. But
I mean, I think it's both to some extent, but you keep saying like it's 50-50, but then when I point out to like the 60s, 70s, like, oh well, back then it wasn't 50-50. Like I don't understand. Like,
no. I didn't say back then it wasn't 50-50. I said back then there were heavy cultural pressures in favor of males or females in certain professions, and I agree that it's right to remove the cultural pressure in that way. That people shouldn't be shamed.
Okay, but if
for
you remove
doing
the cultural pressure, then you're saying that it's not 50-50. Because if it's 50-50, then even with cultural pressure, you should see 50% still trending towards.
No. That's not what it means. What it means is basically if you remove the cultural pressure, then you're basically relying on people's natural inclinations. And if men have a natural inclination to go into construction, even if there's no cultural pressure to say men should go into construction, men tend to go into construction. And women, for example, with nursing, tend to go into nursing, even though there's no cultural pressure either preventing men from going in or encouraging women to go in, then why wouldn't you just chalk this up to natural inclination?
I feel like I'm going to bring up the same thing I said before.
Okay.
I wouldn't bring up the natural inclination because of everything, the distribution of the fields in the 60s, 70s.
Yeah, but the point is, like in Norway, for example, they live in a society where they've specifically removed those things. Like, so it's not like in the 60s and 70s. It's in 2017 in Norway, and yet a similar effect is still seen. But anyway, we'll move on to the next subject. So,
sure.
The immigration thing. I think a lot of people, and I found this. I don't think I understood your position, because you seem to be arguing in favour. I mean, I'm not sure what your ideology is when it comes to immigration, because it sounded really neoliberal to me, really corporatist. And I found that surprising. So would you like to tell me your opinion on why immigration is a good thing?
I think that immigration is a good thing because it brings us undeniable economic benefits to an economy. There are pros and cons to immigration, right? Do we agree that there are pros and cons to immigration?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so I think that if you are enacting any kind of government policy, I think it should be a policy that capitalizes on the pros and attempts to minimize the cons. That is my approach on immigration.
Okay, but what if the cons are due to the scale of immigration?
Then you would scale it back, or you would figure out why that's causing it to happen. What are the incentives in place for people to immigrate? How can you control for things like this? Yeah. Or account for things like this using policy.
And so if one of the cons is that it's easy to immigrate, you would make it more difficult, right?
One of the cons is that it's easy to immigrate?
Yeah, the actual sheer number... Sorry, I misphrased that. The sheer... We agree that, if one of the cons of immigration are the raw numbers of immigrants, then you would make it less easy for them to immigrate to try and reduce the raw numbers, right?
If that's true, but I don't think a con of immigration is usually the raw numbers.
Well, it depends on the scale, doesn't it?
I mean, if you would have dropped like 10 million people somewhere instantly, then sure, I mean, there could be a massive
Well, it doesn't
problem,
even have to be... No, it doesn't even have to be instantly. I mean, like,
okay,
for example, the
United
States has 11 million illegal immigrants from Mexico, and illegal immigration has been one of the major problems in America for decades now.
Well, I mean, it's been a major talking point in terms of a major problem. I mean,
yeah, but it's a talking point because it's a problem for so many people.
Well, no, that's not. I mean, terrorism is a talking point and isn't a major problem for the vast majority of the world.
Hang on. We'll go into that in a bit if that's all right.
Okay.
But I think it's really unfair to say that people in like the southern states of the United States, to say that they don't have real problems with immigration, I think is really unfair. What do you think?
It really depends on the individual, but for the most part, I haven't seen a lot of studies connecting immigration to destroying job markets, across, like, job markets have changed a lot in the United States for a lot of reasons. This happened with manufacturing as well. That wasn't because of immigration.
No, I wasn't suggesting it was. But I'm talking specifically about the southern states and those who have, like, effectively what are, like, new Mexican cities springing up in, like, shanty towns outside of their cities and stuff like that.
I don't know what you mean by Mexican cities.
Well, I mean, literally, as I said, like, massive amounts of immigrants come over the borders. I mean, there are places in, like, Texas and stuff where outside of the city you have, like a Mexican shantytown. Because these people have got to go somewhere.
What does this mean by Mexican shantytown? What do you mean by that?
A shantytown filled with Mexicans.
Okay. What's wrong with this? Or what's the negative here?
What do you mean, what's the negative?
What's the negative?
Do you think having a large group of people who are very poor on the outskirts of, like, traditional American cities, do you think that doesn't come with any social problems?
No, poverty is a really bad thing.
It's not
exclusive to immigrants.
No,
though.
of course
there are a
it's
lot
not.
Of poor rural
I know. Listen. Right, I know it's not exclusive to immigrants, but we agree that poverty for people causes crime. Yeah.
Sure.
So if you bring in a large number of poor people, regardless of where they're from, you stick them together in a little piss poor shanty town, then we will see an explosion in crime. Agreed?
I would agree with you in principle, but
right.
when you look at all the numbers,
that is a direct consequence of mass immigration into the United States.
But it doesn't. But that Hispanics aren't really overrepresented in crime.
I'm not talking about Hispanics in general. I'm talking about in these specific locations where
even
this
across
is happening.
Income levels, I haven't seen, like, immigration pointing towards increases in crime. Those studies have never existed.
But you've just logically agreed that all of these things are true. You know all of these things are true.
I said that in principle I might agree with you, but knowing the data, you cannot draw increases of crime from immigration in the United States.
I can literally speak to the people who say that they have problems with these cultures. And we have a very similar thing with Islamic immigration into the UK and into France. This is why Jontron was trying to reference Europe, because it is a similar phenomenon, even though it's two different cultures who don't share any values. I don't in any way think that Mexicans are like people from the Middle East.
Jontron was referencing Europe, but we were talking about race. So this is a totally... you can reference Europe now, I guess, if you want.
That's what I was trying to say. Jontron, he's an idiot, but I don't think he was actually talking about race. Because this is why he was trying... No, but he doesn't think the Middle East is Mexicans either.
He said the word gene pool,
I know he did, okay? I know, but that doesn't make any sense in the context of his actual argument. This is why I think he was just really flustered.
And the arguments of tribalism, it doesn't make any sense
Yeah,
to
but tribalism isn't based on race either. There will be plenty of British people in Spain who are Welsh and Scottish and Irish, but that doesn't mean that they're not tribal to being British.
I wish on an alternate timeline, I wish there would have been a video of, like, Obama talking about the black gene pool or keeping black people looking like all like each other. And I wish I could have seen a video of you responding to the things he said, because I guarantee
I would have done, yeah.
the people on your side would be furious.
Hey, dude, I'm not saying that those arguments aren't bullshit. Okay, I'm saying that Jontron wasn't making the arguments he was trying to make.
Okay, because it sounded...
I know, I agree. And I agree with you. But this is what I'm saying. He's a bad debater because he's never done it before. And you're not a bad debater.
It's not about being a debater. I'm not debating. I'm usually just asking questions.
Yeah, I know, but it is. When you're in a public forum.
The reason why I initially talked to him was because he was getting mad that white people were being outbred in the United States.
Well, I mean, we've already agreed that being a minority in the United States is a bad thing. So we
didn't agree on that. No, we absolutely did.
You said it.
No, we didn't.
You were the one who said that minorities face problems in the United States.
Yes. But not because they're minorities. That's why we got
actually. I think it is because they're minorities. No, it is because they're a minority. Like, for example, listen. Right, listen.
Minority. Do you think
it's the status of being a minority that's the problem for them? I think, isn't it?
No, it's not.
So it's what, they're black?
No, it's the history.
Yeah, but that's because they're a minority. The history is like that because they were a minority.
At one point in time, they were targeted with government policies to disenfranchise them. And now, 60, 70 years later, this is what we have as a result. If you are in an advantageous position...
I don't think that's true, actually. Right? And I think
you don't think that there was government policy that
No, I didn't say that. I said that I don't think that the consequence of and this is why I say, when you say blacks in America, that's an inaccurate statement. What you mean are poor black communities, can we call them ghettos, or is that offensive?
Ghettos is fine, but I am talking about all blacks in the United States. But
Then
go
what?
ahead.
You're not discriminating between different types of black people.
I mean, depending on the
For example,
specific argument-
Nigerians, 80 something percent of Nigerians who go to America have a degree.
Okay.
So it's
I'm talking about blacks as a whole group of people.
yeah, but they're not a whole
It's
group of
not-
people. That's what I mean with Americans and racializing things, right? What you need to do is speak to low-income blacks, and not even all low-income blacks. We're talking really about low-income blacks in certain like areas like Detroit and Chicago and stuff like this, where they have massive gang problems, massive amounts of crime, massive amounts of murders, totally disproportionate to blacks in other parts of the country. This is why you can't just racialize this. This is why JonTron was wrong to do it, and this is why you're
You
wrong
literally
to do it as well.
just said poor blacks. Is it not racializing things?
No, because I'm not saying rich blacks.
Okay. First of all, tell me what context first you want to talk about in regards to blacks, and then I can tell you if we could talk about them as an entire group of people or as a socioeconomic class. Because when you're talking about things like the penal system, these are problems that affect all blacks, not just poor blacks, but all blacks. So
Well, I was
what
really talking
specific
about
issue do you
the
wanna
state
talk
of
about?
I was really talking about the state of affairs before you arrive at the penal system.
Okay.
So
what
the
specifically?
conditions, I specifically said these sort of like cultures that they find themselves in locations like Detroit and Chicago, high crime hotspots where it's lots of poor people who also happen to be black.
Okay.
Because I mean, we've got the same sort of thing in Britain, like places like Moss Side and like areas of Glasgow and stuff, where it's like 99% white, but it's poor areas with a shitty culture of people who. And one of the things that I read a study about this. I actually did a video about why do blacks commit more crime, and my interpretation is probably very similar to yours. And I used this study from an area in Glasgow that pointed out that when you become very poor, you need some way of impressing people, because everyone needs some way of impressing people. And so you end up using violence and crime as a replacement for having wealth. And I honestly think that's one of the... I mean, that seems to be ubiquitous to poor communities. And not poor countries either. I mean, specifically like insular poor communities. That seems to be a way of like social currency is generated by how much of a badass you are. And that's what this study said. And I think it's true, because I've lived in these sort of areas before, and I think that there are definitely people who walk around with their chests puffed out trying to act like the big man, and these people have got fuck all money, they've got fuck all wealth, they've got nothing apart from their ability to punch someone in the face. So I think that kind of fosters this kind of thing. And so when you say blacks, I'm not talking about blacks, I'm talking about these these deprived communities in Chicago and whatnot, right? And this isn't something that has always been ubiquitous to black people all the way through America. I mean, if you go back to like the 60s and 70s, when black marriage rates were on par with white marriage rates, the crime rate was not significantly higher. But in the beginning of in the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, again, I'll send you the video so you can see all the data that I'm referencing, and all the sources are in there, so you can read through it all for your own leisure. In the 70s and 80s, black marriage rates plummeted absolutely in the beginning of the end of the 70s, and then by the mid 80s, crime rates were going up. And I mean, I'm just a layman interpreting that, but I'm guessing that was a lot of fatherless kids going out and causing trouble. And I think
But why did marriage rates plummet?
Good question. I don't know.
Is it because black people are just less prone to getting married? It's
No.
a genetic thing, a racial thing?
They've plummeted all over the place, but black marriage rates plummeted first.
Why?
I don't
Why?
know. I don't know.
So you have no
You'd have
guesses,
to ask them.
no...
You'd have to ask them. You'd have to say to them, you'd have to go by an individual basis and survey the people, because I mean,
So,
they're
why-
undoubtedly
why are you
still
trying to-
alive. They're undoubtedly
Why are you
still
trying
alive.
to talk about you were just talking about entire classes of people, and now when I ask you a question, you have to go by individual basis? You just said that poor people are more
Because
likely
you're
to
asking me
commit
what the
crimes and use
reason
crimes
is, and
as
I don't
social
know what the
capital,
reason Yeah, but no, that's the consequence down the road. At the point at which the black family breaks down, and again, it's not universal, but in these areas, you can look at the marriage rates, and they are shockingly low. Single motherhood is
why did
really
that
high.
happen?
I don't know. I don't know what happened.
So what is your guess?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I could go to like an individual who would now probably be about 50, who in the 70s chose not to get married, and they'll say, well, I didn't get married for X reason, and someone else will say, I didn't get married for a different reason. I mean,
We're talking about classes of people. We have to talk about stats, and we have got to talk about class influence, not
Yeah, but that-
individuals.
yeah,
That's
but
not
that-
how this works.
yeah, but that's my point. Ultimately, we are always dealing with individuals.
No, that's
Yes,
not
we are.
true. We're
No,
dealing with
every
an entire
individual
mass of
human
people,
makes different
policies.
decisions for different reasons. They might make similar decisions for similar reasons, sometimes the same for the same reasons. But again, I don't know what the reason for that is, so I can't tell you why they did this. I mean, maybe women's liberation was particularly appealing to these people. I don't know. I don't know.
So black people were more interested
No, I don't know.
in being
I don't
liberated,
know.
or
I don't know.
so what I'm trying to find out is black families fell apart, but white families didn't. So I'm asking you what the
Oh, they
difference
did.
was.
They are absolutely falling apart. I mean, like
Okay,
in
why aren't
Britain,
white
for
people
example,
experiencing
50%
similar
of
levels of
kids
poverty
are
as black
raised by a
people?
single mother. So it's you.
Why aren't black people experiencing similar levels of poverty as white people then?
Well, because their families broke up to a higher degree for whatever reason.
Why?
I don't know.
The reason is really important. That's
Yeah,
literally
I know
what
it
we're
is.
talking about.
No,
You told me
no,
my
no. Listen,
explanation was wrong.
listen. I agree with you that the reason is really important. So getting hung up on like the consequences is really, and then saying that it's racism that's causing this. Like, no, I'm sorry, it's crime rates that are causing this, and the crime rates are being directly
Black
influenced
families
by
literally
the breakdown
broke
of the black
up
family.
right after Jim Crow ended, and you don't see any connection to the racially motivated redlining or gentrification or any of these
Well,
policies
hang
in the
on,
United
hang on.
States
What-
to the destruction of black family. You don't
Well,
see any
why?
connection
Hang on.
whatsoever.
Explain to me why redlining prevents people from getting married.
I don't know. Moving people in and out of communities, destroying communities, tearing
Well,
apart communities, like these things all have.
Yeah, but is it preventing men and women from getting married?
It can, sure, if you're breaking up communities or ghettoizing people or forcing people into impoverished
How?
lifestyles. Yeah, sure.
No, but how is that preventing anyone from getting married? I mean, like there are not loads, but there are, believe it or not, black people who are in the United States are married, and black households who are married enjoy a similar level of income to white households.
So, I don't think you're arguing in good faith, dude. I
Oh,
can't.
fuck off, man! No, fuck you! Don't sit here and tell me I'm not arguing good faith.
You're like-
No,
you're literally
listen.
saying, like, we're
I'm
talking
giving you
about black
stats and
people, you keep
figures,
going back
and
to,
you're
like,
demanding I give you the reasons. That I'm not a scientist. I don't
You
know.
haven't given me a reason. You haven't given me a
I
reason.
know. I
You
don't know the reason.
I don't know why.
But don't sit here. Yep, I don't know why. But I'm not going to say that these things aren't real just because I don't know why they're happening.
It's
For
not about
fuck's
them being
sake,
real.
man!
I'm
Come
asking
on.
you why these problems happen? You go, well, I don't know. I'd have to talk to the individuals. These aren't individual issues. These are issues facing an entire class of people. There aren't individual.
They are
black
all
people in the United
individual
States having
issues.
trouble with marriage. The
They are
entire class
all
of black people in the United
individual
States has trouble
issues.
with this, and I'm asking why, and you have no answer for me.
No, I don't have an answer. Nobody does, and you're asking the wrong questions.
But people have given answers. No, these are
No.
absolutely crucial questions. Because for you to come in and just go, well, black people need to get married,
Listen.
more, is entirely fucking retarded.
No,
Like,
it's
you have to
not.
find out why aren't they
Absolutely
getting
not.
married?
Hang on.
You have to address the
Right, okay,
problems
calm
and
down,
fix them.
right? Let's calm down a bit. But seriously, don't accuse me of arguing in bad faith.
Why do you
No.
keep
That is a
talking
no.
about
Listen. That's a dick thing to do. I didn't accuse you of arguing bad faith. Even though what I think you're saying is ridiculous, because what you want
When
to
you
do,
were-
listen, right? What you're trying to do is say, right, more black people are in jail, therefore this must be racism. Even though we know that, like, for white people, if white people are raised in single-parent households, they have a much higher occurrence of, causing crimes. Therefore, they are much more likely to be found in jail. Therefore, what, are the British court systems racist because most of the people are poor whites in jail? No. It's a consequence of poverty, okay? But because this is happening to black people, you go, well, must be racism. No. That's just literally an assumption that you're not proving. I mean, name me a black person who's currently in jail who shouldn't be in jail because they didn't commit a crime, and yet the court just stiffed them because they were racist. Name them.
So the question is, why do black people commit more crime? These are the questions.
And the
that we
answer
have to
is
answer.
because they come overwhelmingly from single-parent households.
Okay, why do they come from single?
Because their parents don't get married. And the answer to
Why
why
aren't
their
they
parents don't
getting
get married is something you'll have to ask the fucking parents, isn't it? I don't know why their parents don't get
It doesn't work
married.
that way. We can't go and survey every single individual and try to remedy their problem
No,
on an
but we can-
individual level. This
No,
is
but
how
we
any
can
type
set-
of policy in the history of all of mankind has been
Listen,
enacted.
I appreciate that, right? I appreciate that we cannot ask every single one of them, but we can ask a representative sample of them, can we not?
This sounds like stats.
That's fine.
So a representative sample would probably point towards the fact that black people were disproportionately impacted by certain types of laws.
And now you
certain
have to
types of
explain how
activity.
that prevents them from getting married. I mean, when these laws were in place, black people had a remarkably high marriage rate. So the
I'm
laws
sure that if black
themselves...
people
Now
were
listen,
slaves, they
listen. The laws themselves were not preventing black people from getting married. When these laws were repealed, and it wasn't even... Let me just get the numbers up just so I can chart exactly the date that this happened. So the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is when they got repealed, right? So, and I think it was the late 70s. I'll find it later. Actually, fuck it, I can't be asked to look for it. It was the late 70s when the black family started breaking down. I don't think, and look, correlation does not imply causation. Just because these things happened at a similar time doesn't mean they're directly related. There could be something else going on that we're not accounting for. Okay? But ultimately, every decision to get married is an individual interaction between two people. We need to survey a representative sample of people who are like, you know, who were basically in their late teens, early 20s, and the 70s, and ask them, why didn't you get married? And maybe it was something to do with the culture or the zeitgeist of the time, being a bunch of hippies or something. I don't know. It could be anything. So, but the point is, I'm not saying it's because they're black. I'm saying it's because they have been through a certain set of life circumstances, and this is predictable. We see it in not just black communities, but white ones as well. I'm sure that, like in Romania, you see one with gypsy communities and things like this. It's not a racial thing. It's just something that happens when people go through these experiences.
The problem is you seem to have this ultra one-dimensional view of how policy or culture or society interact with one another. It sounds to me that unless I can literally show you a piece of legislation banning black people from getting married, you will never admit that any type of widespread policy could have an impact on the marriage rates of black people, which I think is an absurd
but you can't show me any policy that does.
But you can draw lines. You can draw lines. You can say that if you enact policies that break up communities being broke up lend themselves towards poverty. Impoverished communities lend themselves towards people not getting married as much. You can start to draw these correlations throughout all of society.
Yeah, but at no point are you demonstrating why any of this would cause the breakup of the marriage.
That's never going to happen for you, dude. You're never, ever going to see anybody who's educated in a field like this come out and say, well, this thing right here directly influences this thing here. The intersection of society and culture and policy and legislation is never going to be that simple, ever. Never. In any case, ever. It will never work that way.
What? Okay, explain to me why, after the Jim Crow laws are repealed, that black people decided not to get married.
There's a lot of different explanations for that. A lot of people point out the construction of the highway system is destroying certain black communities. Red light.
Sorry, okay, hang on. Okay, let's take these one at a time then, shall we? Right. So just to confirm then, repealing the Jim Crow laws, in your mind, was are you saying that black people only remained married because of the Jim Crow laws, or what?
It's possible that when you give people a certain amount of freedom, and then when you introduce a whole bunch of other variables, it's possible that people can fuck up. But another argument, you could argue that black people who were slaves probably very rarely ever committed crimes. And as soon as you freed the slaves, now you have black people committing crimes. So what was the argument, that because, they were slaves, they didn't commit any crimes? Well, you're putting them into an entirely different life situation.
Well, I didn't say that.
Okay, but I'm just saying, you're saying that, like, well, just because you repeal Jim Crow, it's going to impact, now people aren't going to get married. Marriage is a very complicated thing. This isn't a life thing that just happens when you turn 19. Right, I know. After,
that's why you can't just expect to extrapolate a reason from a bunch of statistics.
But that's what you're trying to do.
No, I'm not. You're trying to do that. You literally demanded that I give you the reason, even though I don't know it. I just know the numbers. And the reason I don't know the reason is because I don't know the people.
It's not about knowing the people individually. That's not how any of this works. If you're talking about something
it doesn't work that way due to a paucity of information on our end. Ideally, the ideal situation is we would know the people. Okay, that would give us the exact reason.
Amount of information.
Yes, I know.
The impacts of Jim Crow laws and gentrification and putting people into ghettos and having them be impoverished.
I know there is, right? But none of those impact the marriage rate. The marriage rate is a different issue. The marriage rate was high under Jim Crow, so you can't say Jim Crow is responsible for breaking up the marriage unless you do actually think that repealing the Jim Crow laws actually broke down the black marriages.
It's possible that repealing Jim Crow laws and then other types of discrimination encouraged black people into areas of their lives or life situations where getting married became less of a priority or less important to them or less likely to occur.
Okay, that's fine, and I'm happy to entertain that, right? It could be. Listen. I don't know. It could be that. Now, what exactly do you think supports that?
The fact that when people do widespread analyses or studies on things like gentrification, you can find that black people have been specifically targeted by certain policies in the past that have focused on destroying their communities. Yeah,
but that's the community as a whole, not the family unit, isn't it?
Do you think the family unit is somehow like invincible from what goes on in communities as a whole?
No, not at all. I think the community is made up of family units, but that's about splitting up family units, not splitting up the family. No, it's the dividing the units themselves into different groups of units, not splitting up the individual units. And the thing is, right? Okay, now let's just go on with let's say that there was some kind of government targeted policy that somehow got black people to stop marrying. Does that exist now?
Probably not. Or maybe it does. I don't know.
Well, let's assume that it doesn't, right? And this is listen, hang on. This is, I think, what John Tron was trying to argue. That he was when he said, like, with fixed racism, he means institutional racism, as in there are no laws saying black people can't do things, right? Now, I'm sure I can't think of a law that does. I mean, I don't think you can either, right? So, right. Now, we see that... let's just assume that there was, the things you're saying... I've got no evidence for it, but let's just assume they somehow contributed to the breakdown of the black family. They are not in operation at the moment, so what needs to happen now?
I don't know. What do you mean, like in terms of government policy, or...?
No, not in terms of... unless you think there's a... I mean, maybe there should be government policies that incentivize black people to get married. Do you think so?
It's possible, yeah. I mean, you could talk about the penal system. You could talk about the targeting of black people for things like drug crimes and whatnot over white people.
Yeah, but you're looking at the consequences again. I'm trying. I'm actually way before anyone.
I'm not looking at the consequences.
Yeah, you are, because this is the consequence of these things.
If you've got a legal system that disproportionately locks up black men, do you think that people that go to jail are less likely to get married?
Yeah, but why doesn't it disproportionately lock up Chinese men?
Because it doesn't target Chinese men.
Why not?
Laws like stop and frisk or the policing of certain ghettos doesn't
Yeah, but
target
why
Chinese
not?
people. It targets black people. I don't know.
Well, I do. I know why.
Okay, why?
There are much higher rates of crime in these communities.
Why is it that when you survey people across the United States, you find out that white people use marijuana far more than black people, but black people go to jail way more for it?
Because these communities are more heavily policed.
Okay, so there's the problem.
Yeah, but these communities also commit a disproportionate amount of crime.
But we just said that in terms of marijuana.
Yeah, but that's one crime, and a minor one at that. In terms of, say, violent crime, these communities are colossally disrepresented, and this is the problem, right? There are people who grow up in unstable families and they become unstable people, and then they commit a disproportionate amount of crime, and then a larger proportion of them go to jail because they've committed crimes. So let's nip it in the bud before it gets to the jail, and let's say, right, okay, so we know that it's single parent families that cause this. This is something that statistically, as far as I can tell, shown. So we should be disincentivizing single parent families, should we not?
Sure. How would you do it? What's your solution?
I'm actually not sure. I'm not actually saying I have a solution, but I think the important thing is identifying the problem. And
Okay, well, here's the problem. The problem is they're not getting married. So now what conversation would you like to take place to fix that?
Well, I think emphasizing the responsibility of people having children is something, because the thing I think that a lot of people take objection to talking about the prison rates is, by that point, it sounds like you're trying to ameliorate personal responsibility. And I agree that it's not really very fair for someone who's grown up in a shitty culture, in a shitty area, where it's high crime, high gang rates, all that. I think it's unfair to expect them to be able to become self-actualized enough to be able to spot this, right? I agree that that's unfair. But we definitely should be talking to people who are thinking about, I don't know, having children, about whether they should have children out of wedlock, because we can say, look, it's an irresponsible thing for you to do, and that's the man and woman, obviously, not before we get anywhere near a criminal justice system. Let's talk to the people who are going to actually breed the children that will become teenagers in a terrible community and then find themselves disproportionately targeted by the police because it's a terrible community and become just another statistic. I would like to avoid that. So we need to emphasize the concept of personal responsibility to young parents.
Okay, how do we do that?
Well, I mean, like the way you were saying earlier, we can have advertising campaigns and stuff like this. And it doesn't have to be targeted at black people, it can just be targeted at young people. And the thing is, like I said, like in Britain, more than half of the children in Britain now are currently in a single parent household. That's a travesty, isn't it? Just that's almost like condemning them to a life of toil and poverty. It's terrible. And the black statistics in America are fantastic to show this, because married black households are barely any different to white married households on average income per year. So it's something that is obviously the problem. So we need to start getting it out of people's minds that they shouldn't be having children out of wedlock. And I mean,
okay, this might be unfair, but earlier you told me that things like targeted ad campaigns for women will have almost no impact.
I never said they'd have no impact. No, I said it wouldn't. No, I didn't say that. I said the government shouldn't be trying to manipulate culture by targeting people for, like influence campaigns.
Why is it okay to do it here?
Well, because this is a real problem. I mean, what difference does it make if the percentage of female, like, let me just get your graph up. The percentage of women in law school is 15% rather than 35%. What difference does that make? Nobody's hurt.
Yeah, but the representation.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Okay, well, I've made the point about representation, but the point is nobody gets hurt from it.
That's not true. Women that could be contributing in that field, or women that might otherwise want to go into it but are discouraged from doing so due to social pressure, might feel like they've lost out on it.
Yeah, but they're not hurt by it, are they?
It depends. I mean, are you saying because they don't suffer like physical pain, there's no damage there? Like,
is
that the argument you're making?
There's no suffering. There's no, what are they suffering?
I mean, all of society suffers. The person that wrote a lot of the code for the first lunar lander was a female. I mean, there's talent.
Yeah, but that's not. Yeah, but hang on. I hate that argument because I mean, you're not saying a man couldn't have written that code, are you?
I don't know. It's hard to say.
It is. No. That's not based on gender. That's based on intellect. But
it was a woman that did it.
Sure.
There have been contributions by people of color or women in different fields in the past. You can't say for sure whether or not these things would have come. If I kill Albert Einstein in the past, I can't say for sure that.
I think that those people's contribution is valuable and necessary, and they should be encouraged to contribute. But I'm not saying that their contribution. Listen, I'm not saying their contribution is because they were black or because they were female, which it seems to be your argument you're making to me.
No, mine was that a female or a black person happened to contribute this, and it might not have happened with people like you saying, well, what's the harm of there only being 15% representation here?
Yeah, but that's the thing. If you're saying it might not have happened, you're saying that them being female or black is one of the things that this hinged on, and I don't think it did.
That particular person being there, that's why I brought up Albert Einstein. I don't know if you kill Albert Einstein if somebody else stumbles upon the general
somebody
theory of
else invents the nuke. Yeah, they do.
You know this for a fact?
I'm certain of it.
Okay.
It's not going to be some sort of undiscovered scientific thing about the universe that just goes uninvestigated just because Einstein died.
Okay. I mean,
I can show you why, right? For example, inventions all through history have been invented in multiple different places at multiple different times and often forgotten and rediscovered. This is how I know that someone else would discover these things.
Sure,
concrete is the perfect example.
20 years longer.
Yeah, okay, so what?
So what? Then we're 20 years behind on our computer technology, on every piece of what do you mean? That's a negative thing for all of society.
You can't know that. You can't know that. And even then, I think
you
it's...
just said they discovered 20 years later.
Yeah, but you don't know that it's necessarily holding back society. There are other things going on. But even then, I would rather a free society of free people who live the lives they want to live than a controlled society that was highly effective.
But again, we're going back to the society of people that live the lives they want to live. No individual is a perfect agent that is capable of making these decisions in a vacuum because we all exist by a culture that we're heavily influenced by.
Sure.
There is no such thing as a culture where everybody's making choices they want to make. You're always influenced by your media and your entertainment.
Yeah. But the choices of what you consume, the choices what people have their whatever desires.
You don't even choose what you consume that much, dude.
Of course you do. The problem, I totally disagree, right? The advent of social media, the social media has actually it used to be that you didn't have that much choice over what you consume, but now people have got incredible choice and it's creating ideological ghettos on the internet. But that's a different subject.
How many people in the United States watch Nigerian TV?
I don't know. Why is that relevant?
Because it seems like to some extent the choices that you have in front of you are going to heavily, influence which ones you choose, right? If you're born in America, you're probably much more likely to grow up watching specific types of programming. If you grow up in the UK, you're probably very likely to grow up watching specific types of programming. Do you think that more people in the United Kingdom prefer tea than people in the United States because people in the United Kingdom are just genetically predisposed to tea? Or do you think that it's because you guys, it's part of your culture?
It's undoubtedly cultural. Undoubtedly cultural.
So there are things so you can't just say people choose 100% what they watch. Of course not.
I didn't say they choose 100% what they watch, but I want to increase the options rather than pressure people into other fields. I don't see why we have to pressure anyone to do anything.
Because people are pressured, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, but I thought that was a bad thing.
No, it's not. Not to. You want to pressure people to go to school, to get a job, to have a family, to not commit crime. Pressures are good. To wear clothes
Yeah, but
in public.
I mean, obviously, I'm not talking about the necessities. I'm talking about their options. I don't want to pressure people to take a certain option. I want them to take the option they like. I mean, they might be, obviously you've got to get a job, but I'd rather
what
than
you
get...
like is influenced by your pressures.
Yes, it is, yeah. Well, it's influenced by lots of things. That's the point.
Sure,
And some of it is natural,
pressures.
some of it is... No, but some of it is social, some of it is natural, some of it is, based on events in your individual existence and, positive and negative things that have happened in your life, the people you've known and things like this. So I don't see why we would need to feel the need to pressure people, because we could always just try not pressuring people, and then people can make decisions as much as possible uninterfered with.
You can't live in a society where people aren't pressured. That doesn't make any sense.
I didn't
What
say
kind of
they wouldn't be
society are you
pressured,
talking
right?
about?
I didn't say they wouldn't be pressured. There will be pressures, right? But we don't need to add new pressures to get to some ideological end goal.
Okay, so you agree that pressure exists right now?
Of course
right?
it does. Of course it does. People
some
have to
of
get
that
jobs
pressure
and
can
stuff,
be one way. Why not add incentivizations on the other side of things then?
Because you're creating new pressures. And I don't think we should.
So we should just leave them one-sided as they exist today and say fuck it and leave it as it is?
We should minimize the pressures as much as we can, but obviously things like getting a job and, learning to read and all this sort of stuff, these are pressures that you're always going to have, so you just endure them. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, what can we do about it? Nothing. But I don't think we should then...
You can introduce opposite things to encourage multiple people. Rather than having every single character of a movie be a white man, you can also introduce women or people of color. These are things you can do to provide...
You are free to do all of those things, and I'm totally fine with the complete plurality of, ideologies, opinions, representation, however you want to view it. I'm fine with all of that. But, I mean, when it comes to, government interference and, organizations for mass social pressure, I'm against that. I don't think they have any need or right to tell people what to do. I mean, this just seems like creating more pressure.
Earlier, then.
No, not at all.
Earlier,
go on.
Earlier, you made it sound like we shouldn't have any of these pressures at all, and now you're saying, well, I just don't want the government doing
ideally, there would be no pressures at all, but even then, I'm not even sure if that'd be healthy for the human condition.
Wait, you're saying without government there would be no pressures at all?
No.
Oh. Okay, I'm sorry, I thought that's what you said.
No, that's not what I said.
So, we live in a society where there are tons of pressures for certain people to do certain things. Sure. Why not try to equalize that a little bit? Do you
because all you're doing is adding new pressures.
But the pressures already exist one way or another. And there are pressures. There are positive and
I know. But the thing is, right, I mean, in the example of, let's say, racial quotas, right? Or let's say gender quotas. Either way, any kind of quota, right? That's a positive pressure in your favour, but that's also discrimination on the basis of sex. And you can say, yeah, well, I've got a good reason to discriminate in favour of someone, but you'll never have a good reason to discriminate against someone on the basis of their gender. And every time you put a quota in, you've discriminated against lots of people on the basis of their gender. So, I'm sorry, I don't agree with these things. And this is what I mean. These positive pressures are never actually positive. At best, you could say they were neutral.
One type of pressure. There could be organizations that exist in schools that incentivize certain behavior, that give resources to people of certain statuses.
Exactly my point.
A quota is just one type of pressure. That doesn't
mean but I don't think
positive pressure is bad.
Yeah, but I didn't say every single kind of positive pressure is bad. No, listen.
These positive pressures are bad.
No, listen. I didn't say they're all bad. I'd say I don't think they're necessary.
Okay, but if you don't have any of these deferring pressures, then how do you ever get people who are currently discouraged from being in a field to maybe be encouraged in the future to take up that field?
Well, I guess you don't.
So
I guess people who aren't particularly incentivized to go into a field don't go into it. And only the people who are incentivized already to go into that field go into that field.
Okay, so then you just leave, if there are some gender disparities that are at 90-10, you just leave those as is and you just...
Well, nobody's arguing to get more women into construction, are they?
No, but that's a physical field that I've already...
but it doesn't matter. We've got machinery, we've got all kinds of stuff now.
Nobody's arguing for anybody.
Okay, architecture
or men don't want to be construction workers.
Well, no, that's not true. That's not true. Okay, no, and it
is true.
No, it's not. Men do want to become construction workers.
Since when?
Since always.
Speaking as an American, are you telling me that if I go to the United Kingdom, I can find a lot of aspiring young men that want to grow up to be construction workers?
Yes, you can.
In the United Kingdom?
Yeah, you can. Right, and do you want me to tell you the kind of men that they are?
What?
I can tell you exactly the kind of men that they are. And I bet you've got these all over America as well. You just don't know who they are, right? These men will be young, white, and poor.
Okay. Does anybody want to be poor?
No, but it doesn't matter.
Okay,
their
so
situation...
these sound like jobs that people don't want to do. These sound like last resorts.
No, these sound like jobs you don't want to do. These men look at that and think, well, that's a noble career. I'll be building houses. People will live in the things that I build. They have. This is what I was trying to say to you in the last conversation we had, right? You have a different perspective on the world than they do. And I think it comes from a position of privilege.
I think that you have just made one of the most insanely privileged comments I've ever heard in my entire life.
Why is that?
You're saying that people that are poor and are forced to work in construction view that as an occupation of nobility?
Yeah.
Okay. I think we should move on to the next topic. I don't think we're ever going to find common
ground.
Well,
honestly, I would suggest try talking to some...
I don't need to talk. I've worked these jobs before. Okay?
Yeah, no.
I was a carpet cleaner for a fucking year. Nobody looks at these jobs as a position of nobility.
No, listen. Carpets
This
cleaner... Carpets
when
cleaner
people,
is not a... I agree with you. Carpets cleaner is not one of these jobs. But construction actually is.
When people grow up as construction workers, dog, they're not having kids with the hope that I hope that one day my kid grows up to be a construction worker.
No, I know. They're thinking of it for themselves. Look, my family does this, man. Okay, I'm telling you. There are even when you get down to the bottom, there are gradients of what is good and what is bad. Right? Being a construction... If you're unemployed but you're good with your hands, being a bricklayer is not a bad job. Being a construction worker is not a bad job. Eventually, you become the manager of that construction firm. You know, you become someone who is respected. This is the life path they aim for, because that's within their vocational abilities and within a realistic scope of what they can actually achieve. You know, and it's unfair. You can, you know, I mean, I'm not a big fan of class divides and, you know, class holding you back and stuff. But that is life. This is something. This is how these people think.
Sure.
They don't see themselves as being in an ignoble position.
Gotcha.
You know,
I mean, it feels to me like in society, it feels like most of the incentives are in place for people to go to school to get a good education and to get a high-paying career or something involved in the sciences or technology or engineering or medicine.
Yeah, but that's not going to be available to everyone, is it?
No, but ideally, that's what most people aim for. When people have children and they try to send them to school, it's not because they want them to grow up to be construction workers. But
no, I'm not talking about the parents. I'm talking about the people themselves. I mean, you know, it's a sad fact of life that some people are not in the above-average intelligence area, right? I mean, they're you know.
I don't think anybody acts like that. Everybody acts like their child has the capability to do anything. I don't think anybody would say, "Well, I have a low IQ child, so I'm just gonna hope I'm a construction worker."
Well, I'm sure that parents don't say that, but people say that to themselves. I mean, you get some people who know they're never going to be a rocket scientist, and then they think, right, okay, but I can do something productive with my hands or something, you know, and then they go into vocational jobs rather like these sort of things rather than academic jobs. And society needs both types, and there's this constant stigma about these things. And I think, well, you live in a fucking house built by some dude who, you know, whose arse crack is always showing, and then he's whacking brick after brick, and he doesn't think of himself as ignoble or embarrassed or anything by his situation. He works hard to get where he is, so I don't think we should pour scorn on them.
I'm not pouring scorn on anybody. I just don't think the general level of the general direction of society encourages a lot of people to take up like jobs in construction or blue collar work. That seems to be the type of work that most people try to avoid.
Again, it depends on where you are. I mean, if you're middle class and you have an intelligent, educated child and you're an intelligent, educated person, then yes, to you that seems like a step down. But if you don't start in that position and you start from, say, a single-parent family on a council estate somewhere, then becoming, you know, an employee of a construction firm like Jewson or something like that in Britain, that's something to aim for, because you're competing with your peers to get
lower
that.
class jobs. That's what you're telling me.
Yeah, they are. They absolutely are. Upper class people don't become construction workers. You know,
but I think that most people that work blue collar jobs, I think that they aspire their children to go to school and do something greater.
They do, but they don't see their own position as being ignoble. That's the thing. You talk about these things like they're like embarrassing or something, and they're not.
No, that's not how I talked about it. But
it sounds, I guess. It's maybe it's my interpretation. But okay. Was there a different subject you wanted to go on to?
I don't even remember what it was next.
Right. Okay. Well, the mass immigration thing, right? There are studies that show, like, there's a study from the Bank of England that I'll send you on Twitter. I'll send you it in a DM. It's a really fascinating one because you seem to argue a lot from a systemic overall position, and that's that's fine. It has its place, but when it comes to things like immigration, it's not really very helpful because systemically it's not very obvious what's going on because it's a huge system and you're only taking in a percentage of people who are like, maybe like 1 or 2%, like 1% of the population or something like that. It seems small, but then if you drill down into the sort of relevant areas, you find that there's a much greater effect. For example, like I can only use the statistics for Britain because they're the only ones I have, but it's the same principle and the same effect happens everywhere. It's the market forces of supply and demand, that if you bring in more labour, the value of labour goes down. We understand this? So if you bring in millions of people who are low-skilled, low-educated, and take up low-earning jobs, the value of low-earning labour goes down.
Okay.
And this affects the people who need those jobs the most and who need their wages to go up. For example, in Britain, it reduced it by 2% a year. Now, I think the last thing anyone wants to see is their wages going down by 2%, right?
Sure.
So you can understand why poor people would be against mass immigration.
Sure.
And so that's the argument against mass immigration. The people who need it to not happen the most are the ones to whom it is happening the most. And they are understandably angry. And so when they say, look, you can't bring in millions of Mexicans because it's ruining our job prospects, it's destroying our future, you can't then call those people racist.
Okay.
Do you see the...
Yeah, I saw the lines.
Yeah, and that is basically, I mean, that's the economic argument against mass immigration, because the only people it really benefits are the bourgeois class who employ these people. And obviously they're doing fine, so we don't need to worry about them so much. They're the people with the money and the wealth and the ownership of corporations and whatnot. We don't need to pander to these people. What we need to do is help the people who are actually going hungry, worrying about paying their rent, the people at the very bottom. And I mean that's not even talking about the social issues that comes with bringing in large numbers of people from a foreign culture. They happen to stick together. Like we already talked about the in-group preference. Everyone has it, including foreigners. So when they come over, they tend to form,
ghettos. Can we
talk
about the economic thing first before we lay out the entire case for keeping immigrants out of the country?
Well, no. I'm not saying keeping immigrants out. I'm saying being selective.
Okay. Can we go back to the economic argument then?
Go ahead, yeah.
So in the United States, where a lot of lower-skilled immigrants were immigrating, one of the things that was found was that when a lot of low-skilled immigrants immigrate to an area, yes, it can have an impact temporarily, or sometimes in the long term, it can have an impact on certain classes of people, right? Mm-hmm. That when these immigrants moved to these areas, the overall market size increased, that complementary positions, that there were certain classes of workers whose jobs were actually bolstered because complementary jobs had opened up as a result, and that the cost of living for a lot of these different types of people for different things had went down, right? There are benefits to immigration.
But these
when
benefits,
a large number of people,
as you've just laid it out there, you literally described how the benefits come at the expense of other people.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, but that's not acceptable because it comes at the expense of the poorest people.
I'm sorry, Doug, but a lot of benefits come at the expense of some people. That's how sometimes it works, right?
Yeah, but it shouldn't.
So your goal, as government policy, your goal is to find the major winners in this transaction, okay, which are oftentimes business owners, and find a way to redistribute some of the major winners' earnings into the biggest losers to try to help them out, right?
Okay.
So whether that means retraining them for different types of jobs, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe there should be a tax on people that import things from China, right? For to help retrain people who are in manufacturing into other... What?
I'm not sure that just arbitrary tariffs are a wise move, but go on. Sorry,
it's not arbitrary at all. I'm talking about specific taxes on businesses that take advantage of cheap labor and having that money divested in a way that helps people that have lost jobs, right, to retrain into either complementary or otherwise different positions, right? Maybe what you do is maybe you find that a fuck ton of business owners are taking advantage of Mexican immigrants coming over the southern border, and you have a tax for every immigrant that comes over, and this is sent into some kind of education fund to help lower class people of all races, right?
Right, okay, so but you could circumvent doing any of this by just not allowing mass immigration.
You could do that, but you're doing that at the expense of growing your economy, because then you lose every other benefit of the immigration as well, right?
That's fine, though. I think that the quality of life of the people in the economy is more important than the size of the economy.
No, you don't. You don't.
Yeah, I do
You would
think
rather
that.
have them working lower level. If you go to like Germany, nobody wants to work as a bus driver from the airport, all right? In general, most of our people want to be more educated, want to get higher level jobs,
Okay.
right? We need people to fill out these lower level jobs, right? If we can tax the biggest winners of that are benefiting from immigration and find ways to redistribute these winnings to the native population to educate them more, to train them into better jobs, this is a scenario where literally everybody can potentially be a winner.
Except for the people who you're exploiting.
No. What do you mean?
The
People that we're
poorest people
exploiting for
yeah.
labor. This sounds like communism. Whoa. Which
No,
group are you talking about?
I mean, no, not at all. Capitalism
Who's being
can be
exploited?
exploitative.
Okay, who's being exploited in this circumstance?
The working poor who are now competing with immigrants for jobs.
So what I'm saying is, you spend money to help out the specific natives that are being the most
Yeah, but you don't have to.
impacted by
You don't have to do that. You
But
just
then
don't
you
have
miss
to
out
allow
on
mass
all of-
immigration.
But then you miss out on all of the other benefits of the immigration. Cost of wages goes up. Cost of product to the
Well,
end
no,
consumer
no.
goes
Cost
up.
of wages goes down.
What? No, what?
Yes, it does.
Wages
When
aren't
you-
gonna go down if you prevent immigrants from coming over, because it's going
No,
to
oh, no. Sorry, that was no. Look, if you prevent immigrants from coming to your country en masse, wages go up because competition for labor is what becomes scarce because you don't have a ready
Sure.
supply of people.
Which is
So
not something you want.
what? You don't want wages to go up for people.
Not in that way. Not because you're artificially limiting the supply of labor. No.
You're not artificially limiting it. You are actually artificially inflating it.
Okay, if you allow people to freely move to an area where they can seek employment because they have economic pressures to do so,
Yeah.
right? Then you'll see it fall in the cost of wages, okay? But then you see a lot of other benefits as a result of that,
Yeah,
right?
but the fall in the cost of
Typically-
wages is an acceptable thing.
Okay, would you be in favor? This is something that I asked the Naked Ape dude. Would you be in favor then of like some kind of like minimum wage, like a big minimum wage or something for these people?
I think the minimum wage has become necessary because of the deflation of wages. If wages weren't going down, in fact, like in Denmark, in fact, Scandinavia in general, they don't have government-mandated minimum wage laws. These things are always dealt like in a union basis in industries, and which is fine. I think that's actually a much better way to do things. And it's because they don't have, well, some of them do, but like, for example, in Denmark, they're actually having a labour shortage at the moment, which is good for people who work because their wages are actually going up. That's
But you don't
that's
want
how
that.
things.
You want to grow the overall size of your
No, you
economy. One of the
don't.
only
No, you
ways you
don't.
can grow the size of an economy is to increase the supply of some type of resource.
No, you
which is
don't, because
labor. Labor
when
is a
you say,
resource.
look, when you say you want to grow the overall size of the economy, what that translates effectively to is you want the 1% to get even bigger bonuses.
Except I literally just said that you can have government policy that redistributes.
Yeah, but
the
I don't
winners
want government policy to redistribute. I would rather we didn't need that.
by
I mean,
artificially inflating the price of labor by keeping it scarce for no reason.
No, but I'm not artificially doing it. You're artificially decreasing it by bringing people into the country who shouldn't be in the country. They've got no legal
You're not.
right
You're
to be
letting
there.
market forces settle on wages. If people want to come over and work for a certain wage, then they're free to do
Yeah, but that's
so.
because
what
you've
the market works in.
artificially
That's
increased the.
capitalism, dog.
Yeah, but that's because you artificially increased the labour pool.
You're not artificially increasing it. People are coming over. You can't artificially increase a resource.
Of course you can. Listen, of course you can.
In the
Listen.
United States,
Yeah,
then that's
but
on
they're
them.
only
They come
coming over
they work,
because
we
you
take
allow
advantage of
them
the-
to. If you let millions of people come to your country, then you're artificially inflating the amount of labour available in your country.
You're increasing a resource. You're giving more labor. That's good.
Yeah, but
though.
that's
fine.
not to the people who need to compete with those people. It's not good. It's bad for them, and they're the poorest people in society. I don't think we should victimize the poor just because it makes some billionaire a few more fucking zeros.
Okay,
a year.
and I don't think we should victimize the poor or the working class by making it so that they have less people to sell products to, right? Because if you don't have immigrants coming over, now you don't have people buying your
I
products.
really
You've got
don't think
less
the
places
size of
to
the
construct
market is
houses
influenced
for,
in that
right?
way.
Because if you don't have immigrants coming over, now you've got, if you're a construction worker, you've got less
No,
houses.
look,
to
hang
build.
on. Right. These people still exist regardless of which country they live in. So if they want your
You're not gonna
products,
go to
no, listen.
Mexico to build houses.
No, but they have the internet. They have international marketing. You can order things from the United States from Mexico, believe it or not, right? And people in Mexico also have the internet, if you allow that. And so look, these people, they don't have to be in the United States to buy US products.
So Mexico
And
is
even
going to
if they
order
weren't-
houses on the internet?
Well, obviously they'll order. These people will just get construction jobs in Mexico buying houses, won't they? Building
But why
houses.
would we want them to go to Mexico? We want to bring these people to the United States and grow our economy. I don't want to grow Mexico's
but your
economy
economy's
with
already
immigration
big.
policy. I want to grow our economy.
Yeah, but you want to grow the economy, the overall size of the economy, at the expense of the poorest people in the economy.
I just said that
then
you can
listen.
count-
Then I know. Then you want to have extra government action in order to compensate for this thing that you shouldn't have done to start with. This is why I'm saying. This is why I'm saying your ideology. Your ideology seems to be neoliberalism, which seems to be pro-corporate influence, pro-government influence, and anti-worker. Because they are the positions you're arguing for.
Everything that you just said is you want to be pro-government influence by having harsher immigration. You want to be pro.
No, that's not. Hang on. No, first point. Let's not gish gallop here. Let's stick with one point at a time, right? I'm sorry. The first point was I'm pro-government influence because I want to restrict immigration.
Okay, so neither of us are pro or anti-government influence. We're on the same page.
No, but that was your point, wasn't it? Because that's not how I see this at all.
Okay, it sounds like you're pro-government influence by making it so people can't immigrate.
Well, we have immigration laws, and I think they should be enforced.
A law is government influence, so you're...
Yeah, I appreciate that, but like, I'm not an ANCAP. I think the government should have a place, and one of the places it should be is to defend its borders. And that's from foreign armies and illegal immigrants alike. And even then, legal mass immigration, is highly detrimental to the native populations. So, and the poor ones especially. So, I don't see why the government why it would make sense for a population to want its government to implement open border mass immigration policies, because it just hurts them.
In the United States, this just hasn't been demonstrated. I don't know, maybe in other countries. Well,
it's just how economies work. Okay, it might not have been demonstrated in the United States, but it's definitely been demonstrated in Europe, and it's certainly something you'll see in the United States if we were to poke around and find the right studies. Honestly, this is just the consequence of increasing the labour pool, is that the wages go down.
Okay, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Everything is a two-way street. There's a lot of different
It is a bad thing for the people who need that labour.
Okay, but the point is to make it so that they can train into other types of jobs so that they don't have to compete with the worst jobs in our civilization.
Well,
we've already
unfortunately,
made that decision.
we're not
we don't
at
want
that
to do
point.
that with manufacturing. That's why we let Chinese people manufacture shit for us, right? Nobody's making the argument.
No, we do that because it's cheaper. The fact that corporations are... it sounds like you're pro-Donald Trump, because everything you're arguing for is going to end up with you with Donald Trump in charge.
I don't think you have any idea what any of Donald Trump's policies are.
Well, I think I actually do, okay? And so far, you haven't demonstrated a solid understanding of any of this. So let's not start judging our expertise here, because seriously, you are arguing for... I mean, Donald Trump is literally threatening tariffs for companies who move outside the country.
Tariffs are the exact opposite of what I'm talking about, dog. When I talk about
I
trade,
know.
open border immigration, I'm not talking about anything Donald Trump is talking about. Donald Trump is talking about pulling out of every single massive trade agreement we've ever been in.
I know, but what you'll end up with is Donald Trump.
Talked about increasing tariffs on every single country. This
Yes.
is the exact opposite of what I'm talking
Yes,
about.
I know. But you don't seem to understand that what you're arguing for ends up with Donald Trump.
No, it absolutely doesn't.
It does, and the evidence is the fact that Donald Trump is your president. He is a protectionist because the globalist sort of attitude.
Protectionism, dude.
No,
when you say I don't want any more labor coming into my country because I need to protect our workers from foreign influence or from foreign
no,
competition,
protectionism is after the fact. I mean, you could call this preventivism if you want. I am preventing the need. No, it's not. Listen, I am arguing for preventing to getting to the point where protectionism is even needed. You're arguing for protectionism of the poor people. Like, right, let all these people in, increase minimum wage, let people, outsource their jobs to any old country. Don't worry about tariffs. I mean, what you're arguing for ends with Donald Trump.
Okay, so let me define these terms for you, because I don't know if you understand what they mean. Protectionism is the idea of putting artificial barriers up to foreign competition for products. Mm-hmm. This means artificial barriers to labor, artificial barriers to importing other goods, okay? That is what protectionism means, okay? Right. This has been Japan's economic policy for the past since World War II. This is the economic policy that Donald Trump wants to go with. When you talk about, I want to make it so that people can't move into this country to work so that we can protect our workers from foreign labor, that is a protectionist policy.
Okay, if you want to define it as such, that's fine.
Economists define it, okay?
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
I'm not saying
workers should be protected from corporate and government exploitation. That's my position on that.
Okay, I'm not saying that protectionism is necessarily good or bad, but what I am arguing for is literally the exact opposite of protectionism. So
yes,
you cannot attack
I appreciate
my position.
that. Okay. Well, listen, right. I'm not saying that that's what you're arguing for. I'm saying that is the consequences. I'm saying that that's the consequence of what you're arguing for. Whether you like it or not,
true.
It absolutely is, and that's why you have Donald Trump.
Can I please
What-
finish my point?
Sorry,
Can I tell you
go
what both
on
sides
then.
stand for?
Go on
Because I
then,
don't
go
think you
on.
understand.
Go on.
Okay, Donald Trump is in favor of protectionist policies. When Donald Trump talks about a 20% tariff on Mexico, Donald Trump is talking about artificially increasing the cost of goods from Mexico to protect American industry. When Donald Trump talks about getting out of the TPP or saving manufacturing jobs in the United States, Donald Trump is talking about protectionist policies to protect our industries from foreign manufacturers, okay? When you're talking about limiting the supply of labor coming into the country to protect our workers, you're talking about a protectionist policy in place to limit foreign influence or people coming into the country to compete with a certain thing. These are protectionist ideas.
Okay, and that's
My
fine.
ideas are
That's
the
fine.
exact opposite field of Donald Trump, okay?
Yes,
I am
but-
in favor of globalized policies that
Okay.
take advantage of the comparative advantages between nations. I am in favor of increasing the supply of labor
Right.
to give lower cost of manufacturing and other types of goods to companies in the United States, right? This is the exact opposite of protectionist policies, okay?
Okay,
My economic
listen, okay.
policies and my ideas on them are the exact opposite of Donald
Okay.
Trump. They do not wind up in the same place
Okay.
anywhere near one another, okay?
They do, because what you are trying to implement is, as you said, directly negative for a percentage of your population. And the bigger the percentage of that population that it becomes negative for, the more people who are oppressed by this, the more they will vote for someone who won't do this, who will operate in their interests. And this
Okay,
is
so
how
you're
you
saying-
end with Donald Trump.
So you're saying that my policy is just like Donald Trump's because it's the opposite of Donald Trump.
It may as well be
That
Donald Trump's because that's the inevitable conclusion. Just because you don't understand why you end up with Donald Trump, because you end up exploiting a large segment of your population, isn't my problem. That's your problem. Anyone listening to this will be able to explain to you that, look, if you oppress someone for long enough, and with an obvious enough reason and motive and means, they will take action against it. Which is why the Rust Belt flipped to Trump, which is why Trump is now your president. These people have problems from your ideal vision of a globalized economy.
But they don't.
They do.
These people have problems because these people were the largest losers of these types of policies, and
Exactly!
nobody did.
That's what I'm saying to you. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Half of my argument, dog?
Yeah,
Half
but-
my argument is finding ways to redistribute winnings from the winningest most people to the people that have been most impacted.
Yes.
You yourself said that the majority of these winnings go to the top percent.
They
Income
do.
inequality and disparity in the United States have grown at unprecedented levels.
That's
I
true.
am over here arguing in favor of finding ways to redistribute winnings from the people that are taking the most advantage of these things and to the people that are being most hurt by it. Do
Okay.
you understand how that position is not
Yes.
a position that is
No,
being
listen,
advocated
listen,
for, and
listen.
that's why the people in like West Virginia and Ohio and Michigan have been left behind the most in these manufacturing
Look, I'm not saying.
so don't say that
listen,
my policy has wound people up in these areas. I am all for redistributing wealth from some of the people taking
Okay.
advantages of these things.
Okay,
The
okay.
difference between you and me is that you want to go completely in the opposite direction, like a child, because you see that some bad things have resulted from these types of policies. I would rather continue to capitalize on the benefits of free trade while distributing the winnings from the winners to the losers, so that we can all enjoy the benefits of a growing economy together.
Okay,
There's
but
a
that's
reason
not
why
how a
even
liberal
poor
society
people in the
works.
United States have access to cell phones, internet, computer. All of these standards of living increases have come at the benefits of globalization. You want to throw all of that out the window so that what? Poor people don't go to college.
I
make $25
think.
an
Listen,
hour,
hang on,
working
hang on,
McDonald's.
hang on. Right? I don't think that the iPhone is invented because of globalization. I don't
No,
think.
but
Right, well,
what do you think
okay.
it cost if we manufacture that in America?
It doesn't matter. I don't care. All right, I don't care.
Then you're-
listen,
then
listen.
I don't
No, no,
think
no,
we
no, no,
can-
no, 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 no.
If you
Listen, no,
don't
no, no,
care
no,
about
no, 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 no.
we're having a
Wait,
conversation of reality,
wait.
dude.
We are. Listen, right? You are arguing for something that is directly negatively impacting a segment of the population, and then to compensate for this, you want the government to redistribute vast amounts of wealth, right? Now, why don't we just not have it that the government has to do this?
Because I already told you, because there are massive benefits to be had from immigration, and I want to
Yes,
continue to.
and there are
enjoy those benefits.
there are also massive problems, and we haven't even gone into the social problems, right? We're just talking about the economic problems, right? There are also massive problems from doing what you're doing, and you've said it's exploitative to one group for the expense of the rest. Well, that's not acceptable. Regardless of what your
Well, I
band-aid
don't know.
solutions
and
are,
I would rather live
right?
in a country where everybody gets to benefit off of a certain policy.
Yeah, but you
and then we just
literally
help
say
some of
that
the
some people don't
disproportionately
benefit.
impacted from it, rather than fuck everybody over with higher costs of goods because you want to protect some.
Higher
arbitrary
cost of
classes
goods
people's
is not
wages.
fucking people over. Just because people have to pay more for an iPhone, that doesn't mean their lives have been ruined. Good God, that is the most bourgeois thing I've ever heard in my life.
It's not bourgeois. It's the opposite.
Fucking
You're
is.
arguing in favor of the bourgeois. You're saying fuck
No,
the
I'm
poor
not.
person. Who cares if they can afford an iPhone? I can afford one. Fuck them. I make a living making YouTube videos. I don't give a fuck if a poor person can afford a computer or an iPhone.
Are you
That's exactly what you're
insane?
saying.
That
You're
is
saying, I'm in favor of the
absolutely
bourgeois.
not what I'm saying. Right? These people, they have problems paying their rent.
Okay, and even the poorest people. Do you agree or disagree that the poorest people in the United States have unprecedented access to technology today that they've never had?
Well, it depends on their wealth, doesn't it? If they could have all of there could be shops filled with technology, but if they can't even feed themselves, then no, they have no access to it.
This isn't happening in the United States, where these swaths of people that can't feed
Really?
themselves. Maybe it happens in the United Kingdom, but it doesn't happen in the United
Really?
States.
Okay, not feed themselves then, but have disposable income is not something that the lower classes have a great deal of.
Okay, but they don't have to have a massive amount of disposable income to afford these goods because of the benefits of free trade, because of the benefits of a lower cost of labor. Like, they can afford these products without making millions and millions of dollars. An
Okay.
iPhone that might cost $3,000 if we protected our manufacturing, industry, isn't going to be something that a poor person can magically afford.
Yes,
just
that's
because
right.
people in West
It becomes a
Virginia have
luxury
jobs.
good. It becomes a luxury good. That's right. These
Why do
people,
we want
these
that?
people, these people might have to only buy one iPhone a year.
Why are you talking about decreasing the standards of living for all?
This
poor
is not
people so
decreasing
they
the
can
standards of
protect
living,
jobs?
okay? Not having an
What?
iPhone is not decreasing their standard of living.
I don't.
And ultimately, they will still have iPhones because they will have jobs which they can earn good money in. They will earn more, therefore the price of goods going up is not that much of an issue.
What you
However,
just said was
them
just
earning
exactly
less...
correct statement. Them not having iPhones won't decrease their standard of living. That is literally an.
Are you
exact-
honestly telling me that someone's standard of living is contingent on whether they have an iPhone or not?
Because you have no idea what it's like to exist without this. Because
Are you
probably
fucking
have
kidding
your
me?
entire fucking-
I am old
You-
enough
you-
to know
you're
not
saying
what it's
you're
like.
saying that it's part of a-
No,
it's part of a-
stop, Destiny, stop right there, stop right there, stop right there, my friend. Stop, calm your little tit train here, because you are totally flat wrong. I existed before the fucking iPhone, you dummy. Just because you're too young to remember what it's like before it, I'm not. It's not a great detriment to someone's life to not have a fucking iPhone. Jesus fucking Christ, man, calm down.
Like, why can't these people just not have so many goods? Their life will be just as good otherwise. For me personally,
Right, are you saying the only good thing about life is consumption?
Bottom have as much access to technology as possible. Maybe for you we would like to tell them what they're allowed to buy or what they should or shouldn't be able to
Right.
afford. I like poor people to have access to as much as possible, but that's just me. Maybe that's the bourgeois talking in
Yeah,
me.
but
I don't know, dude.
you're talking from a position of privilege. That's the problem, right? You're talking from
You're
the position.
talking about denying privileges to people that are lower class because you want to protect some jobs in the United States or in whatever country.
I want to protect every job, effectively. I want to,
No,
not even every
you
job.
only
It's not even the
talked about
jobs, right?
lower class
It's the people,
job.
right? It's the people. You have to understand. And again, we're not even talking about the social issues that come with it. And there are loads of these as well. And these are real problems too. But we won't get into them because I know you're not going to be familiar with them, right? So, from an economic position, it would be better for them to have more money and that these luxury goods cost more than them have less money and the luxury goods be cheaper, because the non-luxury goods, the mundane standard goods they would have to buy, if they've got more money, they can afford more of these and their life becomes easier. That is the improvement in their quality of life. And then once a year for Christmas they'll buy their child an iPhone or something. You know, they won't just get them every
You're
now and
making it sound like if we decrease immigration, all of the people in the United States are suddenly all going to be.
I've literally told you it's poor
There's only a
people.
small subsection of the
doesn't matter.
population
It doesn't
that is
matter.
impacted by immigration, and everybody in the country benefits.
No,
from
but
it.
the people
So
who
why
are
not
impacted
just-
don't benefit. The people impacted don't benefit.
Yeah, I'm saying there is a small subset of people that are negatively impacted.
Yeah, but they're not outside of
everybody else-
everybody. They are included. When you say everybody benefits, they do not benefit, so you are wrong.
I'm saying that there is a small percentage of people that don't benefit, but everybody else does.
Yes,
So why not
and that's
try to find
everyone
ways to
else
benefit?
exploiting these small people, this small group of people. That's unfair. That's
No.
oppressing them.
But what about the construction worker that wishes he could go out and build a ton of houses, but now he can't because the population is dying because people like you don't want new immigrants to come in? Or what about the person that wants to open a store in a part of the city, but there's nobody that fucking lives there, or not enough people that live there, so it's not financially advantageous?
Then they'll have to
And
open
he
a
can't-
store somewhere else.
What?
Then they'll have to open a store somewhere else. They'll have to
Wait,
be
go to Mexico
enterprising.
and do it? You want to
Sure,
send people
why
out of
not?
the country so that they can find labor?
Why not? It's something that happens.
Because I want to grow the United States. I want to grow our economy. I don't want people going somewhere else because they can't find labor because they're trying to find an audience somewhere else.
Yes,
Why
but
not
what you're
continue to
saying...
grow our cities and help everybody in the United States have
Sure.
more customers to sell products to, have a wider tax base to draw money from, have more people that they can bring in as labor for their companies. Why not continue?
Yeah, but
to
that's
enjoy
because
all
you're a
these benefits?
neoliberalist. That's your focus is neoliberalism, right? That doesn't that doesn't no. You listen, right? You are literally not concerned with the quality of life of the laborers.
I am.
No, you're not, because you literally just said, just because it affects a small group of people, everyone else benefits. The small group of people are the people you don't care about. These are the people who end up objecting.
It's about redistributing the... You don't care about everyone else then. That's my argument. You don't
No,
care
because
about
they're not
business
piss
or
poor. They
anybody
can get
else.
along on their
Fuck
own.
all of those people.
No, yeah, they can get along on their own. That's why.
Okay, so you're actually the real liberal here then, right? Because you're saying that I don't care if that business has to pay $25 an hour, or I don't care if that business has to go out of business because they can't find labor without having to pay.
Businesses are created and fall all the time. It's okay for a business to fail. These things happen. I don't agree with artificially propping up businesses.
It's not okay for lower class people to try to retrain or get different jobs. Why is that?
Of course they should. I'm not saying they shouldn't try to retrain. I'm completely in agreement with like government training schemes for people below a certain amount of money. Like university, I would be happy for poor people to have their university for free. I'd be more than happy with that. You know, but that doesn't mean the government should come in and start redistributing wealth wholesale. It would be better to prevent the need for redistribution to start with. Because I mean, like, again, you say that you're acting like this is a one-dimensional thing. No, dude, you're acting this way, right? Because if you start, and Sweden was a great example of this, right? They put a financial transaction tax on their financial transactions, and lo and behold, they all moved to London, or like 90% of them moved to London, right? If you start, say, taxing billionaires really heavily, sorry, I used to be exactly where you were, right? Until I realised that the billionaires will actually just leave. You can't allow it to get to the position where you need to take their money away, and therefore you can't just have these sort of globalized policies.
You said earlier that you were okay with businesses leaving to find cheaper labor. You literally just said that, so I'm not even sure.
No, I said I was fine with businesses collapsing if they fail.
Do what? Oh, you're fine with businesses collapsing. So you're fine with businesses collapsing, and you're fine with businesses going to other countries to find work and to set up there because there's not
absolutely.
The population
If that's what they want to do.
Billionaires leaving.
Well, honestly, do you because billionaires pay a lot of tax, but do you honestly think that there is if mass immigration to the United States is prevented, then what do you think the demographic collapse of the U.S. looks like?
What does demographic collapse mean? What are you talking about here?
Well, as in, like, do you honestly think there simply won't be enough people to shop in the shops anymore?
Sure. I mean, as opposed to having more people, yeah. I mean, there's a supply and demand. If there's a massive demand for a product and you can supply it, then
the U.S. isn't going to just...
demand, then...
If you stop letting people in, the U.S. isn't going to go down to like 50 million people or something.
No, it just won't grow as quickly as it could.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
I don't agree with that. I don't want to sacrifice the economic prosperity of my country. I want it to do as well as it can.
Yeah, but you're sacrificing the economic prosperity of a certain segment of your country. So that the well-off people can do even better.
Everybody benefits from this transaction, but for some reason you're like headstrong, like locked against believing in that. I don't
know because you're wrong. You're wrong, that's why. Not everyone benefits.
So do you disagree with every leading economist that says that immigration, even in its current form, has been a net positive to the United States? You disagree with every
I don't. Yeah, but
that?
no, listen, it's your terms. Listen, a net positive.
Yes.
That means there are some bad things and some good things. And the good things are coming for the people who don't really need extra good things. These are the people who are doing quite well, who buy a lot of who do a lot of consumer spending, buy a lot of cheap electronic goods from China. The people who don't buy a lot of cheap electronic goods from China are the people who are suffering the most under your policies. And I don't think that's right. What did I say
was a way to help that? What did I specifically say?
You started advocating for extra government control, and I don't think that's right either. I mean, I don't want a socialist economy, which seems to be the road you are aiming for.
I don't think socialism is taxing some people and giving that to other people.
You don't think socialism is redistributing the wealth?
That's so every form of taxation. Then we're already socialists, and
no, I didn't say that.
So we might as well do it if that's your definition.
I didn't say that, but you are definitely going down that road, aren't you?
We already have.
No, you know what? Maybe some of them need to be reined back. I mean, like welfare. Have you read Thomas Sowell? Do you read a lot of Sowell?
No.
Right, he's definitely someone to read, because basically he lays out a fantastic argument as to why welfare states, when they get beyond a certain level, actually incentivize people to not get jobs. And I'm all for like a Hayekian style safety net. I don't want people losing their houses, and I don't want people going hungry. And even with healthcare, I don't want people going without healthcare if they lose their job and they're piss poor. But I don't want them getting, and I'm not kidding, the Conservative government in Britain had to cap benefits at 25 grand a year. Right, the average household income in the UK is 22 grand a year. Why is that so high? It's obviously a negative incentive.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't speak to the United
Exactly.
Kingdom or your
but
policies.
this is one of, and honestly, it might be that an expanded welfare state is one of the reasons that households feel they don't need to get married, that people that feel they don't need to get married. Maybe there isn't like any kind of pressure there for them to get married. Maybe that has to come back to help the children that they end up breeding. Who knows, you know? But the point is, what you're advocating for is the sort of thing I would expect to hear advocated in a corporate boardroom by people who have absolutely no care at all for the workers on the ground, who need actual help. And that's why you've ended up with Donald Trump. These people needed help, and Trump is the answer.
Trump is not the answer. Trump
To
is
their
never
problems, he
bringing
is.
back manufacturing jobs to the United
Yeah,
States.
but that's 'cause
none of
he's an
Trump's
idiot.
Economic policy is rooted in reality.
Sure, that's because he's an idiot, and these people don't know any different. But they will still vote for that, because he will say what they want to hear.
Okay, if these people had been targeted by government retraining programs or other types of redistribution from the highest winners of the economy, these people wouldn't feel the need to vote for Donald Trump.
Maybe.
Again, you're trying to throw out. Are you familiar with the term "throw out the baby with the bathwater"?
Well, yeah.
Like it sounds like because there were some losers, but I guess I don't know.
Yeah, but okay, even then, right? Even
Can I?
no, I agree with you. I
understand.
agree with what you're saying. There, go on. Sorry, go
Are
on.
you trying to say that if there are some losers for an economic policy, even if the majority of people win, that economic policy is unacceptable? That's your position?
No. Because some people, like for example, the Conservatives in Britain. I know I'm using examples from Britain, but it's the same principle. They were recently thinking about increasing taxes for self-employed people. I'm a self-employed person, and I didn't object. It's okay. It was only a small increase, and self-employed people generally, entrepreneurs in Britain generally tend to do quite well. So they can afford to pay a bit of extra tax. It's not going to hurt them. And it's not going to be enough to make them flee the country and all of these other things. But when you've got massively poor people who really are like dirt poor, and you're saying, right, your wages are going to go down, that is unacceptable. Because that creates an instability in your social order of your country, and they vote for populist demagogues every time. I mean, that's how Chavez got into power, you know.
To help these poorest people, don't you think there are ways to do this?
There are, and the first and most important way is mitigating immigration. That's it.
Okay, so it's to hurt the entire economy to protect a small subset of workers.
It doesn't hurt the economy. It just reduces.
Does hurt the economy.
Well, how much does it shrink? How much is it shrinking?
What?
How much does your economy shrink?
To measure it exactly would be very difficult, but it definitely hurts the economy. It decreases the sales base of people that you could sell.
Yeah, it decreases the growth. Sure.
What?
It decreases the growth.
So sure. So then we agree. Then you.
I'm not suggesting we throw people out.
Help a small subset of workers, right? If that's your position.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not bothered if the grand total of the American economy is not as high as it could have been with mass immigration. I'm fine with that.
Okay. My position is opposite to that. I would prefer to see a larger amount of growth for the economy. I think that everybody can be helped by immigration, and I would rather see government policy enacted that helps everybody rather than stifling the growth of the economy just to help a small subset of workers to artificially keep their wages high.
Okay, when did you decide to stop being a liberal then?
When every single economic study that's come out, even by people that sit on the anti-immigration side, agree with these points? I wouldn't.
Right, okay. What would you describe your political ideology as then? What would you describe this as?
I don't fit into like a neat thing so that people can, Google me and come circle jerk with me. I have my ideology is all over the board. It depends.
But you don't have a term for what you're proposing then?
No, I don't.
It sounds very neoliberalist.
Sure, I don't hear neoliberal. I thought, don't neoliberals want to get rid of global or get rid of? Oh no, I guess they are.
No, they're very pro globalization.
Okay,
sure.
They're
very pro corporation, pro.
Subscribe to, but I go by what the studies and the experts say. So that's usually my guiding light. I don't know what the term is for all of the beliefs.
Yeah, but you weren't going by some studies, were you? Exactly, you weren't going by the wage deflation studies.
No, I was going by leading expert economic thought.
But listen, right? The study I'm referencing comes from the lead economist of the Bank of England. He's not a nobody. So what I'm saying is, it's about perspective and it's about layers. Your layers are you're looking at very top level very concerned with the overall. You were talking about the overall size of the economy.
Of the economy. I'm looking at leading immigration economists like Borjas, who have come out and said that immigration gives net benefits to the United States, and that a same conversation on economic policy is targeting the biggest losers and helping them out so that we can all continue to enjoy the benefits of these kinds of transactions. Those are the people that I'm looking at. Yeah,
but they're not looking at the things that I'm talking about, that are also by leading economists. That's what I'm saying. What I'm saying. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying.
I'll look at this. Can you give me leading economists that say that immigration has been a net detriment to any economy, and I'll look them up.
Well, it doesn't have to be a net anything.
But the net is the important part that we're talking about.
No, the net's the important part for you. It's the important part for you. Right? For you, a neoliberalist, it's important. But for people who are not neoliberalists, who are much more concerned with their own individual and subjective situations, it's not the most important thing. They don't have to suffer just because overall most people aren't suffering. I find that unacceptable.
If there is a net gain, then you can make it so that everybody wins.
Yeah, but you're constantly band-aiding this now. You're putting plasters all over it to try and fix the leaks, whereas you could just not have a leaky vessel to start with.
Are you talking about Mark Carney?
No. I'm talking about the way your solutions are. What you're saying is, look, I'm implementing a policy, and this policy has a problem. And now, instead of implementing this policy just because a certain portion of the population benefits, incidentally, the top portion of the population benefits, sure. And listen, you're saying that we're going to have to start restructuring the entire system to compensate around this one policy. And even then, that's probably not going to work. But let's assume it does, right? That is a bad idea, in my opinion. I think it's much better to simply not implement
Before we get into millions of this, were you talking about the governor of the Bank of England? Is that who you were citing earlier?
No, the chief economist of the Bank of England.
Okay, gotcha. I don't know what the chief economist position is, but literally somebody just linked me this article on the governor of the Bank of England, the Bank of England, and he is literally saying verbatim every single thing that I've just said.
Yeah, I know, and I'm not saying that you're wrong. By saying
you just said that I was incorrect in everything I was saying, that this isn't the way that we should. This guy, the tagline to this article is literally Bank of England governor urges policymakers to do more to share out the gains from global trade and technology. The first paragraph is the governor of the Bank of England has issued a rallying cry to policymakers across advanced economies to tackle the causes of a growing sensation of isolation and detachment among people who feel left behind by globalization. Yes. What does this sound like?
That sounds like a compensatory method for a problem that already exists.
It sounds like he's talking about exactly the same types of policies that I was talking about.
You are, yes. And I'm saying those very policies are unacceptable to a certain portion of the population. And as a liberal, I am concerned with alleviating oppression. And so if we can just not introduce things that create oppression, that would be better than trying to find a band-aid for it later on down the road.
But if there's a net growth in the economy, why can't we just, if there's a net growth...
Slavery was a net growth of the economy, Steve. Okay?
What?
Slavery was a net growth of the fucking economy. That doesn't mean that, we should just give the slaves some nice quarters then. No, Steve. If people are being oppressed by these things, then you don't do them.
Okay, but what if you found a way to free the slaves and continue growing the economy?
It would be better to not enslave them in the first place. This is my point. You're asking, like, post hoc, like, yeah, but after we've oppressed you, why don't we try and do something about it?
I'm not saying after we oppress you. You
literally are.
Policy can be predictory. It can be before.
It's too late. We're way past that point.
You can enact your policy before. And I'm not saying
but we're way past that point.
And then you unfuck them.
Yeah, but we're way past that point. These people have been fucked.
Okay, so then the only thing to do at this point then is to roll back everything, make the cost of goods for everybody higher, so that we can protect a small subset of people that won't.
Unfortunately, Steve, your goods are probably going to get more expensive. That's true.
What?
Unfortunately,
okay.
Do you not think that these goods might be artificially lowered because of the consequence of the current policies that are in place?
What might be artificially lowered?
Well, these goods, I mean, do you really, honestly, right? There's a part of me that... Listen, right? There is a part of me that knows when I pay £2.50 for a T-shirt, I shouldn't pay £2.50 for a T-shirt.
That's a beautiful thing, though.
No, because that means Indonesian sweatshop workers are being exploited.
Okay, to some extent it does, but Indonesia and China...
literally, there is no to some extent. That is literally what is happening.
Okay, but under your policy, China and India would be left behind to where they were 20 years ago. I think that worker conditions in these countries are pretty abhorrent, and I've argued as much in the past, okay?
Sure.
But you cannot deny the massive growth that every class of people in China and India have experienced as a result of these policies.
I agree, but I don't think the ends justify the means.
Say what?
I don't think... I agree that that's happened, but I don't think the ends justify the means in this case.
Okay, so everybody should remain fucked then, so that
No,
we can
no,
continue to make some people happy. Is that?
No, nobody was fucked before globalization.
You don't think the average subsistence farmer in China or the average slave worker in India was fucked before they had access to global markets?
I honestly think the sweatshops are worse. I mean, they never used to have to put anti-suicide netting around Chinese farms. You know,
Why would Chinese people choose to work in sweatshop shops instead of going out and working in the fucking farms?
often
then,
because
if they're so horrible?
often because they don't have a choice, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. You gave them an option that was better than what they had before. I'm not saying
No,
sweatshops
no,
are good,
no,
but
listen.
whatever exists there is obviously better than what was
No,
there before
listen,
because
listen,
Chinese
that's-
people are choosing to work here.
That's not how this works, right? For example, I mean, I can give you a few examples of this, right? Guatemala and Indonesia are the ones that spring to mind the first. The corporations simply buy up everything around these people. They buy out their governments with bribes. They buy up land and utilities. Like they used to call the United Fruit Company the octopus because it had its tentacles in everything in Guatemala. At one point, it owned 45% of the land of the country, and the peasants had no choice but to work on banana plantations. They had no choice. They didn't have. It wasn't better before the company arrived. Worse before the company arrived, and then the company improves it. It became shit after the company there. Even though they were piss poor before, they were at least free. They at least owned their own land and made their own products. Now they don't have a
Wages in
choice.
China or standard living in China. You're like, well, they were free before. Like, dude, the living conditions in China and India have gone up so much.
Yeah,
over
but there are
the past
multiple
decades.
reasons for that. There are lots
And
of different reasons for
one of the
that.
largest reasons is their access to global markets. You're literally telling
Yeah,
me
but
that
I'm
these
not
people
arguing
have
against
free and
international
wonderful
trade,
lives before.
Steve. I'm not arguing against international trade. I think they should be able to sell their goods in international markets. I think it's a great thing. What I don't think is this kind of predatory capitalism that ends up buying up large portions of their countries and impoverishing the people who are trying to make a living and making them into virtual serfs for these companies to the point where they end up having to put anti-suicide netting around their buildings so people don't kill themselves.
I mean, before
But
they
you
announced
don't
themselves,
care because
they
it doesn't
would fucking
affect
die of
you.
starvation.
Because your products are getting more expensive. Oh god, it's okay if these people are enslaved by these corporations because you don't have to pay very much for an iPhone. That's your fucking argument, man.
So, and this is like so ironic because so you're telling me like you're taking the extreme socialist communist like point of view like the worker should be in charge of everything.
This is not
we need
an-
to inflate
this is-
wages as much as possible and capitalism is evil and all of these capitalist.
This is not a
market forces are
communist
evil.
argument, okay? This is not a communist. This is a liberal argument. It's not a communist argument. If I was a communist, I would be arguing against the private ownership of these corporations.
Well, earlier you just said you didn't care if business owners went out of business. Fuck
No,
the
I don't,
business
but I don't
owners,
want the
right?
government
You
to
said that
own
earlier.
them.
You don't care if they go out of business.
No, but
So, I
that's
mean,
a part
it
of the
sounds
free
like you're leaning
market.
more like pretty close to that direction.
No, that's nonsense. There's nothing like it.
Okay, that's what it sounds. When somebody
that's-
tells me I
it's-
don't give
it-
a fuck if business
they-
owners go to business as long as the lower class gets higher wages, that sounds to me like somebody leaning towards communism. which
Okay,
is
but
what
you're
you
completely
accused me
wrong.
earlier of, funny enough.
And honestly, you're completely wrong. No, I said that I'm happy to agree that you're not a communist, right? But no, that
Okay.
it's certainly not a communist argument to argue for a free market where businesses
You're
rise
not
and fall
talking
on the
about a free
merits.
market.
Yeah,
You're
I
not
am.
talking about a free market. You're talking about protectionism. That's the opposite of a free market. To clarify.
Okay. In a country, within a country,
Okay.
I don't think the government should be buying and selling the people's businesses. It's okay for a business to fail if it fails. If for some reason that business model doesn't work, then in a sort of Darwinian way, it's okay for it to fail. And if one works, then it's okay for it to work and succeed and grow and prosper. Right? That's all fine. None of these are communist arguments. A communist
I
wouldn't
guess-
argue for any of this.
Okay. I guess I was just a little confused because it sounds like you're pretty anti-free market, or at least in a lot of ways.
I'm obviously for a regulated market, but that's what people mean when they say free market capitalism. They don't mean they actually want child sex slaves being sold in the market square or anything. You know,
Sure.
they are obviously talking in a presupposed position of there are regulations within this market. Right? Was there anything else you wanted to go over? Because I think we've probably given people quite a lot to chew on.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think we've disagreed on pretty much every single point. You think that minorities are treated poorly just because they're minorities? History has nothing to do with it.
No, I didn't say that. I don't think minorities are treated poorly just because they're minorities. For example, Chinese
Wait,
people, like you said.
hold on. You said earlier that white people don't want to become a minority because if we became a minority, we would be treated poorly.
No,
Because
that's
people
your
are treated
opinion.
poorly.
That's your opinion.
What?
That's your
No,
opinion.
wait, what? That's exactly what you said. You said
No,
white people
I
don't
know,
wanna
but I'm explaining to you what you're saying. The logic of what you're saying. If being a minority is a problem in the US, then it's natural that the white people wouldn't want to be a minority. But if being a
Okay,
minority isn't a problem, then what are you arguing for minorities for? This is the inherent contradiction in your position
no,
about
this is not a contradiction. Hold on, stop. You said that white people don't want to become a minority because being a minority is bad. I'm sorry, could you go over? These were two totally disconnected arguments. What was the first thing you said?
They're not disconnected, right? So I asked you, is there a problem with being a minority in your country? And you said yes, because minorities are badly treated. And by that logic, why would white people ever consent to being a minority if minorities are badly treated?
There's not a problem with being a minority in the United States. There's a problem with the way minorities are treated. It's not because they're minorities, though. It's typically because of the history going into that particular group of people. They happen to be minorities.
Right.
This is precisely why I brought up the women's issues, because women are not minorities, and said that they face issues too. You do not face issues because you're a minority. I've never said that. You were the one that said earlier, or it seemed like you were saying that if white people become a minority, they'll be treated poorly. I thought that's what you said.
Well, let's be honest. Have you not seen all of the anti-white hatred going around at the moment?
You mean the people posting on Twitter, white genocide?
No. I'm talking about the people in the DNC saying we've got to stop white people from talking. I'm talking about all the affirmative action that excludes white people.
Lady that got up on stage and said,
and everyone applauded.
To listen to minority.
And everyone applauded.
That means that all liberals want white people to stop talking.
Oh, I don't think you speak for liberals, but I mean, I don't think these people are liberals either.
Earlier, you said in one of your clips that I want white people to stop talking. You said that was one of your clips that you posted to me as well.
Oh no, you said you agreed with her though, didn't you?
No, I didn't. I
said
did. That in some instances, yeah, white people need to listen to the
So you do agree to her?
Because people like you exist who think that the only issues that white minorities face are self-imposed, like not getting married enough.
No, I said that about black minorities.
That white people should shut up.
I don't agree that white people should shut up, because you're saying they should shut up on the basis that they're white.
If you're talking specifically about minority issues and you're a white person denying the fact that minority issues exist, then yeah, you should probably listen to
they're not saying that white minority issues don't exist.
Okay, well that was
what they're saying is you can't just point the finger at white people as to blame for this.
You specifically said that women don't face disproportionate discrimination today in the United States. You did say that, right?
Yeah, I don't think women are disproportionately discriminated against.
You also said that you don't think that the issues minority face today have to do with discrimination in the past. You think it's all issues now that aren't related to discrimination.
I'm sure that in the past there were issues, right? But like we can see the stats for, like, I think it was 2015 stats I had in the video. I'll send you the video so you can see the full details for yourself.
Okay.
In the I think they were the 2015 stats. It might have been like 2011 or something, but it's fairly recent. Black couples who get married have a roughly similar amount of income to white couples.
But you're saying that
stop. Because if that's true, then it can't be systemic institutional discrimination against blacks.
That's not true, dude. Nobody would agree with that statement you just made was ridiculous.
That's because everyone's wrong.
Because black people aren't getting married, there can't be any other systemic thing that's causing that to happen. That's what you're saying?
No, if there were systemic pressures and oppressions against black people, how do married black people end up on parity with white people?
Maybe there's something that prevents the majority of black people from getting married.
What?
It's a complicated thing.
Marriage is complicated. What's preventing black people from getting married?
I've already pointed to something.
I know the answer, and you know the answer, but you don't want to say it because then it changes your whole frame of reference, right? No, it does. The only thing preventing black people from getting married is black people. It's their choice not to get married. And then it's about personal responsibility, and that is not something anyone wants to talk about, is it?
Nope, you're right, dude. So this is what people mean when they say that white people should listen to some of the issues that minorities face, because you're saying it's 100% personal choice, 100% personal.
I didn't say 100%, but let's be honest. No, let's be honest. If the black couples who do get married and exercise personal responsibility end up in the same place as white couples, then it's probably not institutional racism, because otherwise those black couples wouldn't end there.
That argument doesn't make sense. I don't understand it. You can't see that. If only 1% of black people get married and 99% of white people get married, and the 1% and the 99% end up in the same spot, you can't go, well, look, everything's fair. There can't be racism. An intelligent person would ask, why are there so few black people getting married?
Yeah, but you can't point me to any government or institutional... No, listen. You can't... You just said you didn't know if there were any institutional barriers to black people getting married.
I didn't. I specifically brought up the justice system earlier.
Okay, how's the justice system preventing them from getting married?
Prison and recidivism rates might influence the fact that black people get married.
Might, but you can't point to anything that you can say this is preventing black people from getting married.
Because you're literally looking at this like a fourth grader. Like you want to see a piece of government legislation that says on this day of
No, you show me a study. Show me a study. Listen, dummy. Look, I'm not saying that. You're saying that. I'm saying show me anything that indicates why black people don't get married. And you can't give... No, you didn't. You said might. You speculated a load of bullshit. You don't know anything. You've got nothing that shows why people are getting married or not. You don't know this. You're making this up because it fits your worldview. And if you don't make this up, then you realise you actually don't have any hard evidence to show yes or no either way. And I don't either. I don't know what the reason is either. And I told you that from the start, right? Instead of making shit up to fit my worldview, I just say I don't know.
And then you say it's personal responsibility and
there is
choice.
Undoubtedly the choice that black people make to get married or not. That seems to be the only logical conclusion at this point. That black people, for whatever reason, in these poor communities, choose not to get married.
I agree. The fucking blacks, dude. They're so stupid, dude. Why don't they just...
No, not at all. Listen, this is exactly my point.
Dude.
I've already told you about the blacks that do choose to get married. They're not a problem. They're not having economic problems.
There are so many black people that are stupid. I think they're just predisposed to not getting
Well,
married.
that's because you're a racist. That's because you're a racist. That's because you're a racist.
You're refusing to speculate on any of the
Because I don't know! Because I don't know and I can't speak. I don't know what the reason is. And I don't think it's because they're black.
The extensive amount of people in sociology that have looked into types of things like this that point to why black people don't get married as much. The fact that high crime rates or high poverty rates could all contribute to this. Instead you go,
maybe, might.
Well, why are they all personally choosing it then? You're implying that it's something to do with their race. Black people are making these personal
I am not. You are the one saying it's to do with their race.
So it must be because they're black.
I have literally told you that under Jim Crow laws, when there wasn't a great welfare state, there wasn't the impetus to not get married, the societal acceptance of single motherhood, black people stayed married. I don't think it's anything to do with their race at all, and I've made that clear. You bring it back to race, though. Why is that?
Because I think that there are policies and programs in the United States that disproportionately impact people of certain races, which can be empirically proven, like the court, like the legal system.
Yeah, there are, absolutely. These impact... No, listen, they impact people of certain races. In fact, and like I said, if you drill this down to more specific communities, it impacts these specific communities even more disproportionately. And then when you look at the marriage rates in these communities, they're really low. Large amounts of teenage delinquency, huge amounts of crime. And then the people committing crime go to jail. And then you're looking at this and going, fucking racism.
Why are they committing
your options are this, right? You either send the black people who have committed crimes to jail, or you let the people who have committed crimes go free. They're your choices.
Or you ask, why do black people commit more crimes than
because
white people?
They are in low-income areas, and low income encourages crime.
Okay, and it also encourages lack of marriage. So then you ask, why are black people...
I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if low income disencourages marriage. I don't think it does. And every time someone gets married, and getting married is one of the few things you can do to get yourself out of poverty reliably. Getting married is a way of getting out of poverty, because now a single household has 2 incomes.
All right. I mean, I feel like we've come at an impasse.
Okay, I'm happy to say that we've come to an impasse. Were there any other subjects you wanted to cover before we end it?
No, I don't think so. I think that in the future, I think that I mean, I'm sure that you won't take any of this, but I think that it does you well to talk about both sides of an issue, because I think that people like JonTron largely, I mean, like the only reason I talked to JonTron is because I listened to him talking to you guys, and it was a massive circle jerk of horrendously one-sided issues. And I think that most intelligent people saw the road that you were sending JonTron down there. You kind of led him into that extreme ethnocentric.
I don't think I did at all. I don't think I did at all.
Okay. I mean, that's the impression that I got. I was surprised.
Yeah, but you seem to be under a lot of misapprehensions. So I'm happy to agree that you had a misapprehension there. But I am not in any way arguing for an ethno state.
You had a video clip of me supporting communism, and now you're here.
I didn't say that you supported communism. I did not say that you supported communism. You asked what's communism have done. I implied you didn't know anything about communism.
Okay.
That was the implication. And I'm happy to agree that you do, and you don't support communism. And from what you're arguing, you obviously don't. Gotcha. It seemed to be like a heat of the moment thing, and I'm happy to say, okay, fine. You know, and the clips come down, so everything's copacetic, right?
Sure. All right. Any final words? I'll give you the last word.
Well, no, I think that I've argued my case fairly, and I think that I'll send you the video over in a second after the stream, so you can see it, because you can see what my position is. I mean, I'm not an ethno-nationalist. I'm not even white, so I'm not arguing for an ethno-state.
No, and I've said as much. I don't think you necessarily are, but I think JonTron is.
Well,
I think JonTron is was pretty mind-blowing to me.
Well, it's because I've spoken to JonTron, and he just said, look, I'm not an ethno-nationalist. I don't think I mean, he's not even fully white himself, so he's not arguing for an ethno-state, but he is arguing against mass immigration, and he does see it as a concern, and it's a lot of people's concerns. And I don't think you can just dismiss it by calling them racists.
Nope, and I wasn't trying to dismiss it, but he's the one that kept going back to race, so...
Okay, well, alright, well, we'll leave it there then, and I guess thanks to everyone for watching.
Yep.
Take care,
thanks
everyone.
a lot, buddy. I'll see you later.
Yeah, you too, man. Take care.